Scandinavian defense, or as Tushar call it, the scam opening. You're about to learn how to control the game, even though you're playing with the black pieces. So the whole idea is to start by playing queen to a4, and then you're going to be using a setup that is it's so easy to use. Like it really doesn't matter what the opponent plays. You're going to be playing knight to f6. You're going to be putting the bishop on f5, just developing your pieces normally. If the bishop goes to c4 or d3, well, not d3, e2, you play e6. And one thing I like to say is whenever their bishop goes to d2 and the bishop is on the same line as your queen, you play c6. Any discovered attack they play, you just pull your queen back to c7 and you're fine. If they don't do any discovered attack, you could still pull the queen back to c7. And after this, they're going to be playing some development moves. Your knight goes to d7. Let's say they try to play queen e2, which blunders a pawn, by the way. But you could go bishop to d6, castle your king, knight b6, knight to d5, and then you're going to be playing like this the whole time. For example, let's say they guard the pawn. You get your king out the center of the board, h3 to prevent some pieces from going here. I like to always play knight b6 to d5, put a rook on d8, put a rook on c8. If you watch this full Scandinavian video, try all the stuff that I teach. And by the way, your endgame skills will also get very good. Your ratings will go through the roof. Kicking things off in the 500 region, today I'm going to be showing you guys the Scandinavian defense, one of the most solid way to play chess. Let's just play queen takes d5, and the whole idea is okay. We're going to be breaking one opening principles. Okay, we're going to be bringing our queen out early, and then once they play knight c3, we're going to be playing queen to a5. We're not going to be breaking any more principles after this. We're going to be using the most solid, easy development from here. The knight goes to f6, and again, the goal is just to develop the pieces as quickly as possible. So keep that in mind. We're going to be developing one, two, three more pieces, get the king out the center of the board. And then pawn to d3 is already weird because my opponent decides to block in his bishop. So let's just continue with regular development. The bishop goes to f5. That's what we've learned. And then one pawn is going to e6, one pawn is going to c6, knight goes to d7, bishop goes to e7 or d6, we castle the king, and just like that, we have the setup. Now, this move, bishop to d2, you guys need to be aware of this. Remember that we developed our queen a bit too early, so don't get carried away and not miss bishop to d2. Now, anytime they play bishop to d2, we play pawn to c6, and it's not just when they play bishop to d2, the pawn is going to c6, and the purpose of putting the pawn on c6 is for our queen to get access to this square c7. So anywhere they move the knight, trying to get some discovered attack on our queen, we just put the queen to c7. Now the opponent decides to play the move queen to e2, which means it's very evident that he's planning on castling his king on the queen side. So with that being said, okay, we could just play queen to e7 here. Remember, if you're a low rated guy, the moment the bishop is on d2, you're like, hey, I don't want to get a discovered attack. I don't want to forget that my queen was here. So just pull your queen back to c7. But in this case, it's fine for me to play knight d7 because I'm aware of what is happening. So the moment he moves his knight, I'll pull my queen back to c7 and I'm fine. Now that he castles his king, I don't even care if he moves his knight anymore because once he moves his knight, he's going to be losing his pawn on a2. So let's just continue with our regular procedure. The pawn goes to e6 as we learned. And okay, I may not play bishop to d6 because after knight e4, even if he takes on d6 with check. Now he decides to play the move pawn to h3, which means knight to h4 is coming. So whenever they play h3, and it's not just when they play h3, just ensure that this move h6 is not something that you have to do, by the way, but I like to do it because, I value my bishops over the knights. So and you should, by the way, you should, it's not a preference thing. So once the bishop is under attack, you should ensure that you have this square for your bishop to go to h7. Now, in this case, I'm actually going to just put my bishop on g6 because kind of want him to play knight to h4 now, because once he plays knight to h4 and I play bishop h7, his knight is going to be looking ugly on the edge of the board. So from here, it's just a matter of development. Bishop to e7, castle the king. There's also bishop to b4, especially if they decide to castle their king on the queen side, because if you notice, this knight on c3 is the main defender of this pawn on a2. So if we're able to get rid of this knight, then we're going to be winning a pawn. So he did play the knight h4 move that we wanted, and we get to save the bishop. Now his knight is just looking weird on the edge of the board, and from here it's just us trying to finish our development. I'm not going to lie though, Most times in the Scandinavian, you're going to be castling your king on the king side. In this case, because he's been pushing his pawns up like this, kind of leading towards the queen side. And you notice what the guy just did. He played knight e4. So we actually didn't pull the queen back the moment the bishop goes to d2. And that's because he castled his king on the queen side. Now, he just made a mistake that is called a drawback mistake. What I mean by that is the knight was guarding a2, knight no longer guards a2. So we take the pawn on a2. And I'm also threatening a checkmate, by the way. So, he has to be careful. So, I mean, he could take on f6 with check, and then I'm just going to take back. But at that point, he needs to ensure that he does something with his bishop, which is what he did. He plays bishop c3, which means now if I check his king, he's just going to be running to d2. But I have something for him. I definitely have something for him. Okay, let's remain principled for now. Let's play bishop to e7 because we're principled. All our minor pieces are developed. All is left for us to do is to castle the king. Knight takes f6 was played. That's fine. Knight takes f6 is fine. Bishop takes f6 is fine. Um, Let's play knight takes f6. I have a little, as I said, I have a plan. Like, especially since this knight is unprotected on the same line as my bishop, I want to be able to hit him with knight e5, hit the bishop, discover an attack on the knight, threaten bishop g5 check, and if he blocks with anything, he gets checkmated on a1. So that's actually a very nice plan. So he played bishop to g2, and again, in a normal scenario, we would castle the king on the king side, but it's opposite side castles. He already pushed the pawns up the board. Plus, we have some mating attack on the king. So in this case, it is actually best to castle on the queen side. But because my king is safe, there's no immediate way to start applying, like doing any pawn breaks to my king. I'm now going to play this move, knight to d5. Now, knight to d5 is actually way deeper than it appears to be because, as I said before, this unprotected knight is under attack, and that's why you should not be putting your knight on the edge of the board. I'm also applying pressure to his bishop, but the secret threat is bishop to g5 check because once he blocks the check with anything, that's going to be a checkmate. I mean, yeah, it wasn't very hard to defend against. All he needed to play was knight to f3. Now I like the idea of playing knight f4 because it forks the queen and the bishop. It's not that I'm going to be winning the bishop though, because once he moves the queen, I mean there is queen to f1, but nobody wants to play queen to f1. That's the thing. Check will just not work. Like once he moves his king, my queen is going to be under attack. If I could just find a way to force him to put one of his pieces on d2, then that could in fact lead to a checkmate. But for now, let's play the move knight f4. It's a very aggressive move. It forces his queen to go back to f1, and then at that point, I'm going to castle my king. Where am I going to castle the king? Okay, I'm leaning towards the queen side, but my pawn on g7 is unprotected. So I may castle on the king side just to protect my pawn on g7. But, I have to be aware that these pawns could potentially march up the board. But because I have such a strong knight on f4, his queen is going to be looking ugly on f1. I shouldn't be afraid of any attacks. In fact, Tushar beat me in a game where he just pushed the same pawn up the board and then checkmate my king. So I'm probably going to try that plan. So let's get the king out the center of the board, getting the rook in the game, guarding my pawn. Okay. It's not a terrible move. That's not a terrible move. Bishop to e5. The guy's just trying to get rid of the knight that is on his half of the board now. Trying to trick this guy now. Like he moves away the bishop. I think I'm just gonna take his bishop eventually. But what if I play bishop to b4 and then I'm like, okay, let's just act as if nothing is happening. Play bishop to b4 and then act normal. And then once we play bishop b4 and act normal, if he thinks he's winning a free knight, I'm actually covering the underrunning square that his king could go to. So first we're gonna play the move bishop to b4, which means we're now threatening a checkmate. So it's also not a hard checkmate to prevent. There's pawn c3, there's bishop back to c3, but remember what we said. Do not push pawns on the side that your king is on. So if there's anything that you could do to force the opponent to push pawns on the side that their king is on, then knock yourself out. So he saw it. He plays pawn to c3. And okay, let's say we hit him with a check here. Was this the 500 guy who played so well the last time? I'm not sure if it was him. But let's give a check here. The king goes here. It's probably not going to work though. That's the thing. What if I take here and then he plays rook takes and then I check and then he plays king up? Also not going to work. Which means I have two of my pieces under attack, by the way, so I have to be careful. With that being said, I think it's time to just take his bishop. No, I have to think actually. I need to think because if I take the bishop and he takes my bishop, you see why you should not trick people? If I take his bishop and he takes my bishop, where's my knight going? That's $1 million question. And then I check his king. He puts the king here. Maybe I check the king again, but then he goes back. What? Am I trying to draw? Okay, so maybe we're gonna take on d3 instead, just because of that reason. So take on d3, rook takes d3, check the king. Now, how do we do this? Okay, I think I have an idea, not an idea. I think I found the solution. It's check. And obviously, if the king goes to d2, we take on b2. But if we check here and the king goes to c2, then we check here on a4. And checking on a4 basically protects the knight through the x-ray, which means once he moves his king, I could just pull my bishop back and then my queen is guarding the knight. So that's actually a very nice idea that I just found. Proud of it as well. So king is not able to go to d2, so king has to go to c2, which means my queen goes here and then I'm chilling. Wait, why would you put your king on D2, bro? Again, another drop. You see why these persons are at 500? Because all the 500 plays good chess, but these are the blunders that they make, bro. You're making drawback mistake. Ask yourself, what was the king doing? It was guarding the pawn, bro. No, you're gonna get mate. He's gonna get mate. First, I'm not seeing the mate though. So let's take on B2 with check. The king now has to go. Oh, it's actually mate. It's actually mate. The king has to go to E. No, it's not mate. But he's gonna get mate for sure. Okay. King went back to E1. Yeah, we're mating him for sure. Definitely mating him. Well, we're going to checkmate him for sure. Let's say we take on C3 because we have two attackers. He has one defender. Let's just take on C3 because the king is not able to move. Once the bishop takes, we take on C3. King is still not able to move. So the knight has to block. And then we check on D3, force the king to move. Check on F4, force the king to go back. All right, there's something here, not 100% finding it. But instead of checking, I know you guys like to type in the comments that I missed something. So let's just take on d3 with the bishop and attack his queen. Like we have to be patient. The threat is better than the execution. Always keep that in mind. And I have an idea to use the fact that I'm pinning the knight to checkmate his king. So there's only one square for his queen. So, don't know why he's thinking. But then I'm going to use the time to get one of my rooks in the game. It really doesn't matter which one of these rooks I use. And then from here, because I'm applying so much pressure to the knight, the goal is to move my bishop to either e2 or c2 to attack his rook. And then that's going to be a removing the guard tactic. And if he moves the rook, he gets mated. If he doesn't move the rook, we take the rook, then he gets mated. So he's going to be getting checkmated. Okay, so pawn to f3 was played. I think he's trying to find some running score for his king. Let's start with bishop to c2, as we said, removing the guard tactic. If the rook moves, we take, will lead to mate. Doesn't move, we take, knight will fall. Okay, so he moves his queen out the way. The queen no longer guards e3. Another drawback mistake. So if you're watching this, my fellow England friend, you're making a lot of drawback mistake. That's why you're 500. So we check here. King has to move here. We check here. Oh, that's mate, no? Yeah, that's just mate. So we check on e3. The king now has to go to f1. I made like 3 drawback mistake one game. So if you're not sure what to work on, just work on the drawback principle. Always, it's crazy. Okay, and that's just a checkmate. More Scandinavian against 600 rated players. Stick around. Opponent is now 600, and I'm still going to be showing you guys some very solid Scandinavian defense. Whoa, okay, this is nice. Someone did not take the pawn. That's very interesting. It's fine though. It's just continue to develop normally. Bishop goes to f5. The only thing that's going to be changing is we're not going to be able to put a knight on f6. With that being said, our knight is probably going to be going to the actual f5 square, and this bishop is going to be going to g4 eventually. Like this could now be transposed into, let's say, the French defense. And I don't want you guys to just not know what to do if they play e5. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play the move pawn to c5, just so that way I'm controlling the center. It allows my queen to be developed, and then I'm going to be able to play knight to c6. So if they take the pawn, you play with the normal setup. If they don't take the pawn, you could play with this setup, and it's very similar to the French defense. On to d4 was played. From here, I'm just going to continue with normal development, knight to c6. I don't mind if they take this pawn, by the way, because once I play pawn to e6, it shouldn't be hard for me to regain my pawn on c5. Eventually, I may want to take on d4, so I'm expecting white to play something like c3 in this position. Bishop to b5. That's an interesting move. And okay, the bishop is unprotected and the king is exposed. But if I check on a5, he's going to be able to block with the knight. I'm thinking about taking on d4, but he's still going to be able to take because my knight is pinned. With that being said, I can't really win any material here. So let's just continue with our development, pawn e6. And if he takes on c5, I'm able to take back. And as I said to you guys, the knight on g8 usually goes to the f5 square. With that being said, the bishop usually goes to g4. So, I may have to break a little principle in moving the same piece more than once in the opening stage of the game. And yeah, let's do it. Let's play bishop g4 now to pin the knight. Knight e7 to f5. And basically, my plan is to apply as much pressure to the d4 pawn. So if you've watched my French defense video or you've watched my Caro-Kann defense video, it's a very similar structure that you guys are going to get, bro. Like, there was no reason for you to give up your bishop for a knight, especially when the knight is pinned. Like, it's literally not a threat. At least wait until I play a6 to attack your bishop for you to give up your bishop for a knight. No, I'm just gonna take back. And you gave up your bishop for a knight, which is good for me. I guess he was afraid of the fact that, okay, I'm threatening to take his knight, then take the pawn, but my knight was pinned. So it's not like my knight could have moved anyways. Okay, he plays bishop to e3. It's not a bad move. I mean, the regular move here is just to take. He takes with the bishop. Pawn c5 hits the bishop. But let's just play knight e7 first. I like this idea. I'm developing. If he decides to take on c5 thinking he's winning a free pawn, then I could play knight f5, which hits the bishop, which is the main defender of the pawn. So then I'm threatening to take the bishop, then take the pawn. If he takes, I could also play knight to g6, attacking the e5 pawn, seeing that the knight on f3 is pinned. And we all know that pinned pieces don't protect. Knight to d2. Knight d2 is not bad. I mean, the guy's trying to develop all his pieces. Let's continue with the plan. Knight goes to f5, hits the bishop. And we could also continue with bishop e7 and just castle the king. And, you guys should know the whole idea. It doesn't matter the pawn structure. Once you know that the goal is to develop the pieces, you should be able to just get your pieces out the pawn structure. It's actually funny that this is a Scandinavian defense video. And my opponent played immediate pawn to e5. Queen to e8. Queen to e1. He's basically just trying to get out of the pin. It's not a bad move. He also has two pieces guarding d4. I have two pieces attacking d4. So I'm not seeing myself winning any material right now. And he's also trying to protect his bishop. So if I take the bishop, he takes with the queen. What I may do though is play the move queen to b6. Because for one, I'm attacking the unprotected pawn on b2 that I don't really have any intention of taking that pawn, especially with my king in the center. But now I'm also targeting the d4 pawn. So now I have one, two, three attackers. He has one, two defenders. So it would be best for him to take on c5, I think. I mean, pawn c3 is also an idea. And I'm not telling you guys that I don't have any intentions of taking the pawn, but I don't know. Maybe I will. Nah, I won't. I'm not gonna be greedy and take that pawn. That's what I wanted him to do. I wanted him to defend this pawn, missing the fact that I was applying pressure here. It's just counting. He's losing material. Two defenders. I have one, two, three attackers. Maybe he doesn't count my queen as an attacker because it's all the way down here and it's kind of seeing through the pawn. But that's not how it works, bro. Now we take the pawn. You're not able to take back. Now you have to move the bishop. I'm ahead by a pawn. And then bishop to b4, pinning the knight to the queen is also going to be very annoying. Okay, I don't know what this guy saw, but this is counting, bro. It's counting. You have two pieces attacking d4. I have two pieces protecting d4. You can't take on d4. That's just a free piece. You had to find somewhere to put the bishop. Because now if you take, my queen is there to guard it. You just lost a piece. Just like that. You're now down by a piece. GG's. On to c4. Here's what we're going to do now. We're going to develop our last piece. We're going to play the move bishop to b4, pinning the knight to the queen. Now we have two attackers. He only has one defender. The thing is, though, there's actually no way for him to add additional defense to the knight. Like, there's no rook to d1 because my bishop covers the square. He's also not even able to play f3 to chase away my bishop because the f pawn is pinned. This is GG's. He's about to be down by two pieces, 14 moves into the Scandinavian defense. Okay. which is why he decides to play pawn to h3. It's like one of those offense is the best defense. But we also know about in between moves. We also know about danger levels. He's attacking my 3 points, but I'm still going to take his 3 points because once I take his 3 points, I'm now attacking his 9 points. So he's not able to touch my 3 points. His 9 points is looking almost trapped, by the way, but he's able to play queen b1. Wait. No, it's not trapped. If queen b1, I could try bishop f5, but he's just going to put the queen back to d1. So he did play queen to b1. No, okay, my bishop is under attack. I was about to play bishop to f5 to hit the queen, but then I noticed that bishop to e2 traps the rook. Now his rook has nowhere to go. Yeah, this is a beatdown because I'm already ahead by 5 points. I'm about to grab the rook. This pawn is unprotected. Ouch. Okay, so he decides to just take on c5, but I'm not in a rush to take that rook. It's just trapped. So I'm just going to take back on d5. The rook still has nowhere to go. Remember, the threat is better than the execution. I'm not in a rush to do anything. I mean, I'm going to castle my king eventually, but and this is the same thing. If a piece is trapped, sometimes it's good to wait until they try to save the piece to take the piece because that way you gain tempo. If a piece is pinned, same thing. Wait until they try to save the piece to take. Well, wait until they try to get out of the pin to take the piece because you gain tempo that way. All right, queen to c6 was a good move. I didn't probably should. That was a good move because sometimes this can happen. By the way, guys, sometimes you get too fancy and then now queen c6 is a threat. So if I take the rook, queen c6, and I lose my rook. And if king up, then there's like some perpetual check business happening. What I'm thinking of though is to play queen to c3. But queen c3 takes, there's rook c1, which is fine. Let's play queen c3 because I'm trying to trade the pieces off the board anyway, so he's still going to be losing his rook. Because after takes, there's going to be two rooks under attack. So even if he moves the rook and attack my bishop, I'm just going to take his rook. And then once he takes my bishop, I'm able to pull this bishop back, and I'm going to be ahead by so much material. Like, yeah, this is just bad. And he also doesn't have any time on the clock. So he's going to take this rook. My bishop is unprotected, but then I'm just going to pull it back. And I'm not even sure how many points I'm ahead by. It's a lot. Okay, so he took the bishop. Let's just pull this bishop back, saving my bishop. Could have given him the bishop, but we're not giving away anything. If he plays a5, we'll pull the bishop back again. Okay, rook's on the 7th. Let's castle the king. We're in the end game, but I don't really need my king to win this game. I just have so much more material than him. He hits the bishop. Let's just move the bishop out the way. And the plan from here is just to attack his rook. Okay, now he attacks my bishop again. Well, the opponent resigns. More Scandinavian against 600 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 700. Let's play some more Scandinavian. Now, he immediately take. So we're going to be playing queen takes. And from here, we're going to be seeing knight c3 for sure. And then the queen is going to be going to a5. And we know exactly what's happening. We know exactly where to put the pieces. Knight f3, we go knight f6, and we're going to be seeing this a lot in this video, by the way, like someone developing the two knights like this, and then they go bishop c4, put the pawn on d4. This is usually how everybody plays it, even the strong players. Pawn to d3 though is definitely a mistake. Like, it would be best to get the bishop out first because pawn to d3 blocks in the bishop, which is why I'm going to get my bishop out first before I play pawn to e6. Except to e2, he's trying to castle. Let's just play pawn to e6 here. And then I'm going to play pawn to c6, assuming he's going to be putting his bishop on d2. So he castles the king. Let's go pawn to c6, just following our very simple setup. Pawn to a3. Like, a lot of persons play pawn to a3, but it doesn't really do much. I think they're trying to prevent the bishop from going to b4, but that's not even our intentions to put the bishop on b4. So let's just play bishop to d6 here, just to point our bishop towards his king. And then we're going to play knight d7. And anytime the bishop goes here, we pull the queen back to c7. And this is basically the setup. This is basically the idea, the game plan that we're going with. Bishop to g5, okay. And now I'm just going to play knight d7. The thing is, if you're aggressive and they take on f6 before you castle the king, you could actually take with the g pawn and then put your rook on the g file and start an attack on their king. But just to keep things simple, I'm going to castle on the king side, take with the knight, and so that way I'm able to show you guys what you're going to be seeing mostly in your games. Pawn to b4. No, once they play pawn to b4, we're not able to take because the rook is guarded. So let's just pull the queen back to c7. That was the square that the queen usually goes to. It just takes a little detour like this, but it usually ends up on c7. And then we castle the king. We're definitely going to play h6 because we don't want to allow the opponent's pieces on our half of the board. Yeah, bishop takes f6. I was definitely expecting that. A lot of persons just give up their bishops for knights for no reasons. And these are persons who watch my videos, by the way. So keep that in mind. Like, you watch my video, don't just take a knight for no reason. Like, let's just why couldn't he have just played knight to d4 in the first place? Why did he think he has to take the knight, then play knight d4? That has nothing to do with nothing. Even though knight d4 is a drawback mistake, by the way, because the knight was guarding h2. It's no longer guarding h2. And I have this battery pointing towards h2. So first, we're going to be taking on h2 with check. So we don't necessarily have to save the bishop. And then once he moves the king, that's when I'm going to be saving my bishop. Now, he could play pawn to g3 and said, hey, I'm trapping your bishop, but I don't mind if he plays g3 to trap my bishop. I should be able to just sacrifice my bishop. I'm going to have 3 pawns for the piece, and his king is going to be massively exposed. Well, he did find pawn to g3. This is going to be a very interesting game. Let's take on g3 because I do not have the piece. But I'm not down in material, as you guys could see, because I have 3 pawns. He has the bishop, but look on this king. King is just so exposed. I could check from so many different angles, and he has an unprotected knight. Keep that in mind. Okay, queen to e1 was played. Not bad, by the way, because I'm not able to play queen h4 check and attack the unprotected knight because, he's trying to trade the queens off the board, which is the correct thing to do. But instead, I'm going to play queen to h3 check, forcing the king to move. And then from here, my plan is to try to bring as many pieces in the attack as possible. So I'm expecting him to play king to g1. And then after king to g1, I'm going to castle my king. And I'm castling my king here. I'm choosing to castle on the queen side so that way I gain immediate tempo on his knight on d4. And I'm also trying to find ways to swing my rook over to the king side. I mean, rook to f3 here. Okay, I thought rook to f3 is a move that I'm scared of, but I'm not because it allows my queen to get access to this g4 square. So he decides to play the move queen to f2 instead, which guards the knight. But I think I just need to bring more pieces in the attack. Knight to g4 is also a very strong move because here's the thing. Even though the bishop covers the g4 square, knight to g4 hits the queen. If the queen moves, queen to h2 is going to be a checkmate. If the bishop takes on g4, queen takes g4, checks the king, and that's one more additional attacker on his knight on d4. So knight to g4 could be the move that gives me back my knight. And if you sacrifice a piece for 3 pawns, from a material perspective, the position is equal. So if you're able to get back that piece, then you're just completely winning. Yup. He took on g4. Now we take on g4 with the queen, and we're going to say check. Now, there's also queen to g2. We can always trade the queens and then take the knight, which is completely winning. But I have an attack on his king. The only time where we do not trade queens, well, I'm not going to say the only time, there's other times. But we don't want to trade queens if we have an attack on someone's king. If you're ahead in material, you also want to trade queens. So if we trade queens here, it's winning. But I think I'm able to checkmate his king instead of trading the queens. Plus, if he blocks with the queen and I take on d4, his knight on c3 is also unprotected. So I'm also going to be winning this knight. Okay, so he moves the king out the way. And again, trading queens is winning. But let's just take with the rook because I have some ideas of playing queen to h5 and then swing the rook over to g4, which could win his queen or even checkmate his king. Let's see. I'm not just completely winning because we got back our piece. That's not a bad move. That's not a bad move. It hits the rook. He's trying to neutralize the rook. But I'm going to continue with my plan. Queen to h5 check, forcing the king to move. And okay, my rook is under attack, so I'm going to move my rook as well. But once I play this move, okay, there's also rook to h4, which threatens this. But let's go rook to g4 check. He's not able to block with well, he can block with the queen, but he has to block with the knight. And then once he blocks with the knight is pinned. Whenever a piece is pinned, what do? We PP on the PP. Because now we have two pieces attacking his knight. He's only guarding with his queen. There's also no way for him to add additional defense to his knight. So I mean, he's gonna get checkmate, but I think he's gonna be losing his queen, then getting checkmated. Okay, queen to h2. Was expecting something like that. Let's just take on g3 with check, force the opponent's king to move. Oh, but then he sacrificed his queen. He could have just moved the king in the corner. Let's just take the queen. And from here, it's just GG's. He moves the king in the corner. I'm going to play bishop h5, which my opponent resigns. More Scandinavian against 800 level players. Stick around. My opponent is now 800. Let's play some more solid Scandinavian. So they take, we simply take with the queen. And then once the knight goes to c3, we play queen to a5. So this is like the only time we're going to be breaking opening principles. From now on, it's going to be very, very principled. Knight f6, that's already 1 out of 3 minor pieces that has been developed. Once he developed, we play bishop f5. That's now 2 out of 4 minor pieces that has been developed. Bishop to d3. Whenever they play bishop to d3, it's fine to just take, by the way, and then after queen takes d3, I recommend, well, it's not necessarily a recommendation. This is just a personal preference. Like, I'm going to choose to play c6 before I play e6, so that way queen to b5 doesn't necessarily force the queens off the board. And then once he castles, then I play e6. So it's the same setup that we're going into. Sometimes it really doesn't matter which one you play first. Like if I play bishop d6 before knight e7, like once you get into the setup, you're fine. Bishop to d2, we know what to do once we see this bishop on d2. Let's just pull the queen back to c7, no funny business. And then from here, it's just regular development. Rook to e1, very good. He's putting his rook on the same line as my king. Let's continue to develop. Knight to d7, and then I'm going to go bishop d6, and then I'm going to get my king castle. Okay, I'm not going to lie. I actually wasn't expecting him to play pawn to d5 here. Like, I could have always played bishop e7, but pawn to d5 is a nice idea. It really shows his understanding of chess. My king is in the center, he's opening the center. Now, it does not work, but it shows his understanding of chess because I'm able to simply take. And then once his knight takes, I takes. And then once his queen takes, I just develop my bishop. And then he's forced to move his queen. But it really shows that at least he knows what to do when someone's king is in the center of the board. And that's commendable, Mr. Uzamaiko from Morocco. Okay, queen to d7. Now I play bishop to e7. And the issue is, he now has to move his queen. And then I'm just going to get castled. And, nothing has happened. Maybe if he had done that against someone who doesn't know what's happening, then, something could have happened. So that's not bad. So in this scenario, I should have played bishop e7 instead of knight d7 if I don't want him to play d5. But fine position. He has to move the queen, and then I'm just going to castle. Okay, so queen went back to d4. I'm playing a very aggressive play, by the way. Like, his pawn is hanging. Definitely we're not going to take. And he's attacking g7. So let's just get our king out the center of the board. And if he plays bishop to c3, then he's actually really, really aggressive. You see? I knew he was going to play that, but now he's going to get himself into a worse position because, okay, he's threatening checkmate, but offense is the best defense. What's the best way to prevent a checkmate here? It's very simple. He's threatening checkmate on g7. We just need to move the pawn to g6. Move the pawn to g6. Okay, I was just joking. Well, that wasn't even a funny joke because I can't even explain why that makes any sense. The move is actually bishop to f6. Offense is the best defense, forcing him to move the queen out of the way, and then we take the bishop. Now, the whole point of this is once we take the bishop, he's going to be forced to double up his pawns. Whether he wants to trade the queens off the board or not, he's going to have isolated double pawns. Black, on the other hand, has literally no weaknesses on the board. So I'm going to put both of my rooks on that c file, and I will be winning those weak pawns. So he moves the queen out the way. Now we simply take on c3. If he takes with the pawn, double up his pawns. He takes with the queens. We still double up his pawns. Now what's the plan? We're in the endgame. Attack weak pawns. Push past pawns. Activate the king. So move rook to c8. It doesn't really matter which rook goes to c8, by the way. The plan is to go rook c7, rook c8, put 2 rooks on the file. So he starts to defend. let's now play rook to c7 because I have one attacker, he has one defender. So rook c7, now I'm going to play rook to c8 and I'm going to have two attackers. So if, if he sees what's coming, he needs to play something like, okay, that's also a move. So that way, once I play rook to c8, he plays rook to d3. So now I have two attackers. He has two defenders, but it doesn't stop there. I'm not going to stop until I win that pawn. So if he plays rook to d3, I hit him with knight c5, hit the rook, and then knight to a4, and I win the pawn. Oh, wow. Didn't see that. Did not see that. Such a good move. Because if I put my knight on any weird looking square, I'm actually checkmated. Oh, it's actually very important for you guys to move one of these pawns. It's called creating loft, by the way. It's fine though. I'm just gonna move my knight back to f8. Like if he wants to play rook to d8, that's on him. I'm just gonna take the pawn. But that was a nice try. Like he's playing a lot of moves where players at his level would probably fall for it if I was them. Because the moment he played it, I actually thought I was gonna lose the knight. But knight to f8 is just a nice move. And the good thing is he's now not able to play rook to d3. So it's actually now guaranteed that I'm gonna be winning the pawn on c3. Rook to b1. You see, yo, this guy. He's not weak. That's the thing. Because he notices that if I take on c3, I'm leaving my pawn on b7 unprotected. And now when I play the move pawn to b6, it gives him enough time to play rook to b3. And then all of a sudden, he's defending his pawn. The guy's not weak. Okay, so we're back on the endgame grind. So let's play pawn to f6 with the idea of playing king f7. I think it's best to play e5 first, though. If I manage to play e5, which he did allow me, he's basically trying to improve his king. But I'm going to first play e5 so that way his knight doesn't have any good forward moves. Like, that's something that you guys need to keep in mind, especially, well, when playing against any pieces, to be honest. But especially a knight and especially in the end games, you have to ensure that there's no way for the opponent to move their knight forward. I'm also threatening a fork on e4, but, the guy's playing so well, I don't think he's going to be falling for a little pawn fork, to be honest. So okay, he pulls the knight back. Looks like the knight is heading towards e4. Let's play knight to e6, improving my knight. My knight could go to f4. My knight could go to c5, which would be a fork. So still a very nice move that I just played. And my whole idea is just to get rid of one of these rooks that is guarding his pawn, so that way I'm able to take it. Okay, rook to d6, I wasn't expecting. I mean, the guy's being very aggressive, but he's leaving this pawn unprotected, which I'm not able to take, by the way, because if I take the pawn, I leave my knight unprotected, draw back. So what if I go king f7, just guard the knight. He goes knight e4, and then at that point, I just play king e7 to apply some pressure to his rook. And at that point, eventually I'm threatening to play f5. So let's just be patient. Remember, we're in the end game. Like, I'm not going to lie, guys. Maybe you clicked on this video and it seems very long. And it probably means that a lot of the game's going to the end game. So if you're someone who wants to get better at the end game, then these games are going to be helping you a lot because I'm going to be discussing stuff like, exactly what to do in the end game. For example, attack weak pawns, push past pawns, activate the king. So pawn to c4 was played. Now let's play king to e7, attack the rook, force the rook to move. And wait, am I just winning? Where is he going to move the rook? Isn't the rook trapped? Yeah, because now once he pulls the rook back to d3, we already spoke about this, right? What do you think black should play here? It's actually knight c5, forking both of the rooks at the same time, and then it's now just GG. So I didn't necessarily get to grind out the end game like Magnus, but I'll take it. Definitely take it. Rook to a3 was played. Okay, let's just grab the rook. And he is attacking my pawn, but he has to take back. Not sure why he took with the knight and not the pawn. Now his pawns are still weak. And remember what we said in the end game, guys. The winning side wants to win the pawns, not trade them. So I'm actually going to play h6 instead of taking on c4. And then eventually my plan is to gang up on the c4 pawn and win. Now I'm ahead by an exchange. There's a very famous chess player who says, I think it was Capablanca. He says, if you're ahead by an exchange, your plan is to find a way to sack the exchange, get to an endgame where you're ahead by a pawn. So even if he plays knight to d2 to guard the pawn, I'm seeing myself sacrificing the rook, but maybe not now. Like, I'm gonna at least try to win. And then if it's getting hard, then I'm going to sack the rook. But because we're in the end game and the plan is to attack weak pawns, if he plays knight d2, there's rook to c5 and rook a4. So he's attacking my weak pawns. And now let's just play Let's just play king to f7 to guard the pawns. Again, we're not trying to trade. He moves his knight. And if I play rook c5, there's knight e4. And if I takes, that's a check. We have to be careful. So let's play f5. You guys see what I'm doing? I'm looking on the possible moves forward that the knight could play, and I'm trying to prevent them. The knight could go to f3, by the way, but if the knight goes to f3, then I play king to f6, guarding my pawn. And then at the right moment, I take on c4. Patience. It's very important in the endgame. Okay, now he's getting his king in the game. And then what should we be doing? We should be attacking weak pawns in the endgame. So now I play the move rook to c5 with the plan of playing rook to a5, targeting this weak pawn on a2. Okay, rook to f3. He's also targeting my weak pawns. But let's just play king to e6, guarding the pawn. And then I think he's going to play rook back to g3. I think he watches my videos and he knows what to do in the endgame because he's really being annoying, attacking my pawns. Pawn to h4. Okay. Okay, now that he plays pawn to h4, I think it's the perfect opportunity to sacrifice the exchange. Because remember what I said before, we're trying to go into an endgame where we're ahead by a pawn. But if I sack the exchange now, he takes with the knight, I takes with the rook, I'm actually forking two pawns. So once he guards this pawn, I go here, and then I'm ahead by two pawns. So let's sacrifice the exchange. That's a very nice idea. Now, once he takes with the knight, now we take. Now I'm attacking two pawns at the same time. I think it's actually best for him to protect the c pawn. So let's actually say king to d2. And then if king to d2 and I take, he plays rook to c3. And then he should try to get his rook on the same line as my king. But then he plays king to d3. Can I play e4 check? And if he takes, nah. I could, but that's it's kind of risky. Let's just take the free pawn. I'm ahead by two pawn. I'm still threatening e4 check. And he has to defend against e4 check. And then I'm going to continue with moves like rook to a4, continue to attack his weak pawns. Like, you guys should be, after this video, you guys should know how to play the endgame. Rook to g3, we play pawn to g5. We're trying to protect our pawns, not trading the pawns. And then we play rook to a5, attacking the weak pawns. Okay, and this is exactly what not to do if you're down in material. Don't be the person who offers the trade. Like, I understand if you're down in material and then people force the pieces off the board. But if you're down by, let's say, two pawns or even one pawn, a lot of times it's best for you to lose another pawn than to just offer up a trade like this. Like, this is now just over. There's literally nothing you could do. So from here, it's just a winning king and just a winning king and pawn ending. Let's just play king to d5. And from here, it's just a matter of just creating a pass pawn and winning. He also only has 20 seconds on the clock. H5 was to prevent his king from running here. And now I'm just going to continue to roll the pawns up the board until I create a pass pawn and then just win the game. Okay, let's improve the king. Plan is to create the pass pawn. The pass pawn has been created. Now we have two pass pawns. Let's continue to roll the pawn. And now I have queen on the board. He's not resigning. I guess he wants to force me to do the checkmate, but that's just a very easy checkmate. And that's just checkmate. More Scandinavian against 900 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 900. More solid Scandi coming your way. Okay, he took. Let's just take back. Knight c3, queen goes to a5, regular stuff. Knight goes to f6, bishop f5. We've seen this so many times now. So, it should just be very easy what's happening. Once the bishop is on the same line as the queen, we play c6. And it is covered attack, pull the queen to c7. We've just seen this so many times. Okay, bishop e2. Let's go knight d7. Probably gonna play queen c7 here, just to just to not confuse my lower rated players. Like, personally, it should be a bit uncomfortable if a bishop is pointing towards your queen like that. So bishop g5. Now we play e6. Bishop goes to d6. We castle. We could also play bishop e7 because something that I've been saying a lot is if the bishop is on g5, we put the bishop on e7. But before we do anything, let's just play h6 because he's giving us the tempo. And then once he moves the bishop, I'm actually going to play bishop d6 here because even though the bishop points towards my knight, it's being supported by the other knight. Bishop c4, now we get the king out the center of the board. And this was the whole idea. So I could play rook to d8, eventually I could play c5. I could also play e5. There's a lot of stuff that I could do here. Very solid position. Rook to e3. It's a very bold move. Not sure why. It's also a mistake, by the way, because I have two pieces targeting h2. He has two pieces defending h2. Once I play the move knight g4, I now have three pieces targeting h2. He still has two pieces guarding h2, but I'm attacking the rook. So that is called a fork or a double attack. So once he moves the rook, we grab the pawn in h2, and just like that, we have our advantage. So he decides to move the rook out the way. And let's just take with the bishop so that way he's just not able to take. If I had taken with the knight, he could have taken. But now that I take with the... Come on, bro. This is like the quickest Scandinavian game. This is mate, bro. Just move the king. No, I'm just going to take his knight once the king moves. That's mate. That's just a checkmate. But more Scandinavian against 1,000 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,000. Let's play some more solid Scandinavian. And again, they take, we just take. It's very simple. And that's the thing. It's very solid. A lot of players play the Scandinavian aggressively, but I think you should actually play it solid. So after queen a5, again, the moves are so simple. The knight goes to f6. Once they develop, we first put the bishop on f5 so that we were able to play e6. And then, if the bishop goes to d3, just take on d3. That's fine. We don't mind trading the light squared bishop. And now we're going to be setting up our very solid structure with pawn to e6, pawn to c6, knight d7, bishop e7, and castle. Now, I probably should have started with pawn to c6 because he could have actually played queen to b5 if he wanted to trade the queens. But white players shouldn't want to trade queens this early anyways. But now I'm going to play pawn c6. And again, once the bishop goes to d2, just pull your queen back to c7. No need to wait until he moves the knight. Like, no need to be fancy. Pawn a3 was played. Remember, when they play pawn a3, don't be afraid of pawn b4. Because if they play b4, there's bishop takes b4, and that's a free pawn. So let's just continue with regular development. Knight goes to d7. Bishop is going to e7 or d6. You see that? The bishop is now on d2. What do? Just pull the queen back to c7. Regular stuff. Then we play bishop d6 and castle. Very solid position. And now you guys know the plan. We could play e5 or c5 in the future. The rook goes to d8, one rook goes to c8, and then knight b6 to d5. So rook to e1. Let's play bishop to d6, get the king out the center of the board. And then eventually my fellow Uzbekistan friend will make a mistake. All right, so knight back to e2 was played. Not sure why. Probably he wants to put the knight on g3. Who knows? But let's just get our king out the center of the board. Like the last 12 moves, we already knew exactly what was happening. So he did play knight g3. And now we just need to think about, do I want to play e5? Do I want to play c5? With a knight on g3, maybe not going to play e5 because the knight gets the f5 square. So let's play rook to d8. Let's put the rook on the same line as the queen because I think c5 is going to be the break that we're going to be playing. And if we're going to be playing c5, then the a rook is going to be going to c8. All our pieces are going to be very, very active. Okay, so he moves the queen. The guy knows some chess. I put my rook on the same line as his queen. He moves his queen off the same line as the rook. So knight d5 could hit the queen. But okay, there's also knight b6. There's the same knight b6 to d5 idea. Let's actually go with that first. Because if I start with knight b6, I'm not only threatening knight c4, which forks the queen and the bishop. I'm also, continuing with the same idea that we talked about, which is knight d5. But the guy played bishop to a5. That's a nice move. Not gonna lie. Wasn't expecting that at all. So let's continue with the plan of pawn c5 here. And okay, I mean, come on, bro. You didn't need to do all of that though. Like if you're pinning a piece, just pin the piece. Look for ways to put pressure on the piece. Why are you taking the piece? At least wait until I try to get out of the pin. Then you take the piece. Okay, I'm thinking about taking with the pawn, but I prefer to take with the queen because for one, I don't have double pawns. Two, the rook can always go to c8 and that's an open file. Three, I'm attacking the pawn on b2. And four, if he takes on c5, I take on c5, hit the queen. So I'm chilling here. Which is why he played pawn to b3. He decided to protect his pawn. But I'm going to hit him now. Watch this. We're going to hit him now. So we're going to start with pawn takes d4. And if knight takes d4, we hit him with bishop c5. And that's already three pieces attacking the knight, and he only has one. If pawn takes and he plays queen takes, we still hit him with either bishop takes e5 or bishop takes g3. Probably I'm going to be winning a pawn here. So let's take on c5 here. And that's the good thing about having this rook on d8, because once the queen takes, the rook is going to be on the same line as the queen. Or, my fellow viewers, we could actually win a piece So if I take on g3, he takes my queen, and then I do in between move, win a pawn. But what if I take the actual queen? His knight takes, the knight is unprotected and is on the same line as my rook. Then we take on g3, and then once he takes back, we take the knight, and just like that, we're ahead by a piece. So queen takes d4 is actually the winning move here, and just like that, we're winning the game. So he decides to take. Let's just grab the knight. We're ahead by a piece, by the way, so it's just a matter of trades from here. Rook to d8, put to a rook on his second rank, and just start trading. Pawn to c4, okay. Let's just play rook to d8. All our pieces are now active. Like a trade is fine, but I'm not gonna lie. If I could get like both of my rooks on the second rank, then that could actually lead to checkmate. And he's also not able to even challenge the open file right now. So let's see. So pawn to a4. Now we play rook to d2. Rook's on the seventh is in heaven. It's the second, but it's the same thing. You know what I mean? Okay, rook to b1 makes some sense because I think he notices that I want to play rook to b2, so he guards it. But let's just play rook to c2 anyways. This is his only chance to not get a very quick checkmate. He's not able to allow me to put two rooks on the second rank. It's going to lead to mate. So he has to try to trade one of the rooks off the board, which, I'm just going to take, and then, which he didn't do. So now that I have two rooks on the second rank, this should lead to a mate. He's, he's at least going to lose the two pawns, but I'm confident that this is going to lead to a mate. Rook to rook to c5. Let's just take the pawn with check. The guy's threatening a checkmate, by the way, but all our moves are coming with check. So let's play rook to f2 with check, forcing his king over. And then the plan is to play knight e4, followed by rook to g1. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be putting our knight on e4, hitting the rook, and then once he moves his rook away, then he's okay. That was just a trick. Hopefully you guys saw that if I put my knight on e4, rook to c8 would have been a mistake. If you haven't seen that, then you're just watching the video blindly. You're not even trying to think about what's happening. You're just zoned in. No, maybe the word is not zoned in, because if you were zoned in, you would have seen it. So rook to c7 was played. Now I want to check on g1, but then he takes my rook. But once I play knight e4, I protect the rook. So I could actually pre-move rook to g1 because there's nothing he could do to prevent a checkmate. So if you actually put this position on an engine, it's actually going to say rook check, and then after king h7, rook to h8 check. But he decides to take a pawn, which means that's just a checkmate. More Scandinavian against 1100 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1100, more Scandinavian coming your way. And now we see knight c3. So this is actually someone who, they're like, okay, I'm not going to take that pawn because then he's going to bring the queen out early, and I'm afraid of early queen attacks. If they do this, I want you to take the pawn because, again, in the Scandinavian, I want us to have control over what's happening. And then I'm going to go bishop to f5 to hit the knight. And then once he pulls the knight back to hit the bishop, okay, we have to move the bishop. So we're going to put the bishop on g6. And then what are we going to do from here? Our same exact setup. Now, and this is very similar to the Caracan, by the way. Very, very similar. Very similar. So knight f3, usually they want to go knight e5 here. So let's just go knight to d7. But you guys are going to see how I transpose into exactly the line that I wanted by playing pawn to e6, pawn c6, knight f6, bishop e7, queen c7, castle, and then it's the same thing. So now that the bishop goes to d3, I'm actually just going to trade the bishop on d3, and then after they play queen takes d3, I'm going to play c6. You guys see where this is going? Like, if you watch the video up to this point, you should know what my next couple of moves is. Well, the knight goes to f6. He castles his king. That's fine. We know where to put the pieces. The bishop goes to d6. The rook goes to e1. Okay, rook is on the same line as the king. I want to castle. Let's just get the king out the center of the board. I was about to say bishop g5 could be a bit annoying, but it's not because I'm able to play g6 and chase him away. So he did play bishop g5. Now I'm just going to play h6 and then chase the bishop away. And again, this is how I want you guys' game to go. It's very solid. It's like, especially if you're one of those players who blunder a lot. If you blunder a lot, you shouldn't be playing aggressive stuff. You shouldn't be playing dynamic stuff. You shouldn't be playing stuff where, okay, it's very risky. I attack him, he attacks me. Nah, bro, just don't blunder. Just put the pieces where you know they belong. The queen goes to c7, rook goes to d8, rook goes to c8. Now we play e5 or c5. Now, I'm not gonna lie. The knight b6 to d5 idea I may not do because for one, there's no bishop on c4, so it doesn't really attack anything. And two, if I play knight b6, he's just gonna hit me with c4. Now he's threatening a fork, and I can't go to d5. So now I'm just going to play c5, or maybe I need to put the rook on the file first, but a lot of times it's good to just open the file, then put the rook on the file. Sometimes it's okay to put the rook on the line, then open the file, but you don't have to always do that. So he decides to take. Now I'm just going to take with my knight, so that way I'm able to gain a tempo on the queen. And then once he moves the queen, I'm going to put my rook on the open d file, and then put my rook on the open c file, and then all my pieces are going to be doing something. So he moves the queen out the way. Rooks, they need files. So one rook is on the d file. He plays bishop to e3. That's fine. One rook is on the c file. And show me one piece that I have that is bad. That's what I want you to do. All right, the guy's giving up his knights for a bishop. I mean, I know what he's doing, by the way. I think he's like, okay, I'm playing against Akim. If I get to the end game, I could get a draw. That's what people think when they play Magnus. But hey, I hope you guys see what happens when people go in end games with Magnus. So let's take on c5. Don't be giving up your bishops for knights like this. Knight e4, it's a very good move. I'm not gonna lie though, the guy's playing very solid. The guy's playing very solid. But I'm gonna do one of those things that Magnus does when persons go in end games with him. So he hits the bishop. Let's just take the knight. That's fine. And white has no weaknesses. Black has no weaknesses. So this is just gonna be one of those games where we're just gonna play. We're not gonna blunder. We're just gonna keep on playing. So queen takes was played. I like the idea of queen b6, which hits this and this, but then there's something is gonna go on e2. So first I'm gonna play b5 because the idea is to do the minority attack. This is called a minority attack, by the way. Less pawns versus more pawns. Anytime you have less pawns versus more pawns, push the less pawns up the board, because once you push the less pawns up the board, let's do some math here. If you have 3 pawns and then you cancel 2, then 1 is going to left back. And if there's only 1 pawn left back, then it's going to be a weak pawn because it's not going to be able to be guarded by another pawn. So knight e5 was played. That's a good square for a knight. Queen b6 is now something that I'm thinking about. Yeah, let's play queen to b6. No. Nah, queen b6 doesn't work. I mean, I hit the pawn. Yeah, let's play queen b6. Wait, queen b6, there's knight d7. But then I take on f2 with check. The king moves, I sack the rook. And then once the rook takes, I take here. And then I'm fine. I'm going to be ahead by just a pawn. But that's all I need to win. So queen b6, now I have 2 pieces attacking his pawn on f2. And then he pulls the queen back to f3. Offense is the best defense at its finest. He guarded f3 and he's now attacking f7 twice. If I play rook to f8, that's weird. If I play rook c7, I lose this pawn. If I play queen b7, I blunder my queen. Okay, I have to go back to c7. Queen to b6 didn't. Queen to b6 was not it. Queen to b6 was not it. God damn, the guy's 1100 and he's playing very well. Very well. And he puts the queen back on e4, and if I put my queen back on b6, he puts his queen back on f3, and it's just a draw. I'm not trying to draw. So let's play pawn to a5, and this is me just advancing my pawn majority up the board. This is basically the plan. Like, I don't want you guys to be in a position where, okay, all your pieces are on good squares, but you don't know what the plan is. This is the plan. Advance the pawn majority. So knight goes back to d3, which means my bishop is under attack. I just pull the bishop back to d6, countering h2, and then he plays pawn to g3 to guard it, and then I'm thinking about b4, which doesn't work. b4 takes, there's knight takes, and then if I takes, there's queen takes. All right, I'm thinking about queen c4, just get the queens off the board, take with the pawn, so that way I'm weakening his pawn on b2. If knight here, I take, he trades the rook, then I play rook to d2, but then he takes. I don't like that. Okay, let's play pawn to g6. I'm looking for very slight improvement of my position. For example, g6 followed by h5 followed by king g7. These are some ways how Magnus wins his games. By the way, he just finds what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to outplay my opponent. Like, okay, it's an equal position, but I'm just going to slowly improve my position. Maybe pawn h5, maybe pawn h4 in the future, maybe bishop to f8 to g7, just moving around the pieces and not blundering until boom, he makes a blunder or his time runs out, even though in this case his time is higher than mine. But let's see. For example, this move, knight to f4. Now, bishops are better than knights, but what we're about to do is, this is called, the word is not conversion, it's called transferring the advantage. I think that's what I'm doing. And I'm not saying I have an advantage, but I have a bishop, the guy's a knight. You could call that something. But what I'm about to do is I'm about to give up my bishop for a knight. But what do I get in return? I give him double pawns. That's all I need to win this game. Now we're in the end game. What do we do in the end game? What is very important to us in the end game? The king. So what I'm gonna do, wait, it's tricky though. I don't want him to play rook e5. Takes rook e5. Let's play b4 first. I want to play king to g7, king f6, but if takes rook e5, that's actually very annoying. So let's play pawn to b4. Yeah, this is gonna be one of those endgame grinds. Like for all the persons who are not really good at endgame, like watch this video. I'm sure that black has an advantage here. The position is equal, but he has double pawns. Watch how exactly I'm going to be able to win this game because my opponent has double pawns. Okay, he's trading. That's fine. Rook to e4. Very good. He's also attacking weak pawns. Ah, that's a nice move actually because I don't want to I don't want to defend the pawn like this, but I have to. I think the best move is to check and then when the king move, I go here. And then once his rook takes, I take. But that's gonna make the game a bit harder for me to win. So I'm gonna play rook to b8, just voluntarily putting my rook on a weird looking square. You see the move that he just played? Bad move because his pawn on a2 is weak. And by the way, just to let you guys know what my plan is, every single move that I play, I should be attacking a pawn, pushing a pass pawn, or activating my king. So let's play the move king to f7 with the idea of activating the king. He's doing the same. Let's just activate the king. Okay, he's doing the same. And now I'm going to play rook to b5, just a slight improvement of my rook. He plays rook to c4. And now I'm going to play king to f5, just improving my king some more, trying to target his weak pawn. Like, if I'm not able to find a way to break through what's happening, I'm just going to play rook here and then take here. But I'm not going to rush it. So let's play pawn to f6 first. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have played pawn to f6 because now I have to push one of these pawns, especially when his rook checks my king. But now let's play h5. Let's just continue to make slight improvement of the position. We're just waiting on the mistake to come, by the way. Okay, king to e3 was played. Okay, the move I didn't necessarily want to play. I don't want to undouble his pawns, but my king has no squares. So let's just play rook a5 and attack this pawn. If he takes, I takes. If he check, I block. Didn't want to do this, to be honest. Actually, if he so he takes, if I takes, he check, I block, I'm gonna have a weak pawn myself. So maybe I need to push e5. Nah, that doesn't make any sense. Let's just take. Check, I block. Now I block, and then once he takes, I have a weak pawn myself. Okay, this guy's playing very, very strong. Pawn to f4 also wins a pawn. God damn. Okay, let's go here, hit this pawn. Okay, this guy's playing very well. Let's go back. That's a dead pawn, by the way. But how am I gonna win this game? I have a little plan though. I'm gonna take this pawn, get my rook behind this pawn, and then try to march my h pawn up the board. This guy's 700 though. I want to see the accuracy of this game when it ends. Okay, so let's grab this pawn. He pushes the pawn. Let's get the rook behind the pawn, and then we roll this pawn up the board. So he pushes the pawn again. Now we roll the pawn up the board. The good thing is my rook is actually cutting off his king, so his king is not able to go back to stop the pawn. So he puts his rook here. Let's continue to roll the pawn up the board, and here I'm just trying to roll my pawn all the way up. He checks. Okay, the king has to move. Let's just go back now. This is under attack, and my pawn is 2 moves away from queening. If he checks again, I go here, and his pawn is still under attack. This guy's 1100, bro. Yo, big up Algeria. Big up Algeria. The guy's representing Algeria. Okay, there's a little trick here. Let's see if he finds it first. I'm going to repeat. No, actually, it's fine. If I go here, he needs to play. I think he needed to play here. And then if I push, he checks and take the pawn. But because he pulls the rook back, I'm just going to grab the pawn. Just like that. We have swindled him. Okay, I'm going to put the rook back on b3, cutting off his king. guarding my pawn. If he pushes the pawn, I'm not going to take because the winning side should not be trading pawns. The winning side should be winning the pawns. Now we play king a5, and this is now completely winning. Once he pushes, I'm going to push. Worst case scenario, I'm going to sack my rook for the pawn, and then I'm going to have two connected pass pawns, which wins the game. But damn, bro, you're 1100. Calm down. So he pushes the pawn. No, I push the pawn. And if he pushes the pawn again, I go here behind the pawn. Because remember, rooks belong behind the pass pawn. And then he has, okay, so he plays king back. Let's not rush the end game. So now we play rook to f3. Rooks belong behind the pass pawn. Okay, if he sacked the rook, I just play rook takes and then go back. So he guarded the pawn. Now I play king a4 and then hit the pawn. And then we win the game. Whoa. Okay, let's push the pawn. And one thing I want to tell you guys is once you have two pawns on the sixth, or in this case, the third, they become stronger than a rook. So a2 is now, there's just nothing he could do. He checks. I'm just going to move the king. I'm going to queen on the next move. And if he goes all the way back, now I play g2. And now I'm just going to have a queen on the board. So he probably has to just resign here. So he pushes. Let's just queen the pawn. He has to sack his rook. And then now we just have a rook and a queen on the board, which is crazy. And then from here, the guy resigns. More Scandinavian against 1,200 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,200. Let's continue to play some Scandinavian defense. He took the pawn. Let's just play queen takes, regular stuff. You guys should just know exactly what's happening. Knight goes to c3, queen goes to a5, and then we're just going to be playing our normal development, very normal setup. Knight goes to f6, and this is not something that you want to just memorize, even though it's very easy to remember, and I'm assuming you're a chess player, so you have good memory. But the bishop goes to f5. We're still following development principles, which means we're trying to develop all four of the minor pieces. So we already have two pieces developed. You know, we got our queen a bit out too early, but we knew what we were doing. The bishop goes to d2. What do we do when the bishop is on d2? We play pawn to c6 and we pull the queen back to c7 so that way we don't have to worry about any discovered attacks. Yes, he could use the discovered attacks now, but it's only one move, knight e4. And then once we move the queen and he takes our knight, okay, I'm happy that someone is playing this move. So knight goes to e4. Please do not think the opponent blunders a knight and forgot that you did develop your queen early. So let's pull the queen back to c7. That's the score for the queen. And here's a little idea that I want you guys to keep in mind. We look on our moves in chess like investments. The guy made 1, 2, 3 knight moves just to capture a knight that has only moved once. So if you're good at math, 3 minus 1 is 2, which means he wasted 2 moves. In addition to wasting 2 moves, he's also helping us to develop our bishop. So we didn't even have to play e6. We just play e takes f6, and just like that, our bishop is going to get easy development. So from here, it's just knight e7, bishop e7, castle the king. Probably going to play bishop to e7 instead of bishop d6 because Queen to e2 might be annoying, especially if I play bishop d6 now. He plays queen e2, and that's just annoying. So let's just put the bishop on e7, so that way there's no queen e2 check. Then we castle the king, and we're still going to be using our normal setup. So same idea, same idea. His king is castled, our king is castled. Okay, you could say his development is complete, apart from the fact that he hasn't connected his rook. But if he plays queen to e2, and his c2 pawn is left unprotected. So he has to deal with that first. So maybe pawn to e3. And okay, rook e1 is also a very nice move because, I want to play knight d7. But if I play knight d7, I'm hanging my bishop. But honestly, though, I actually wanted my bishop on d6 anyways in the first place. I just didn't want him to check. So let's just use the time to play bishop to d6, and then we play knight d7. And then, okay, like all our pieces are developed. All our pieces are on good squares. We have an unprotected bishop, but yeah, all we need to do is be aware that we have an unprotected bishop. Now he plays pawn to g3, and that's what we want to see because now he's creating some light square weaknesses around his king. I wasn't even threatening to take on h2 though. That's the thing. He's basically defending against something that's not there. Guy's seeing ghost. But let's just continue to develop. Let's go knight d7. All pieces are now developed. So moves like rook to e8 is coming, putting the rooks on the open file. Rook to d8 is coming, putting the rooks on the open file. Pawn to h6 is coming, just in case he plays knight h4, so we can hide on h7. So everything is going as planned here. Okay. Knight to h4 was played very early by him, which means we're not able to pull the bishop all the way back to h7. I guess pawn to g3 makes some sense now. If I want to save the bishop, I can always play bishop h3. But just remember, guys, like it's not the end of the world if you have to give up this bishop on g6. And if he does take, then we have very famous pawn cube. And pawn cubes are usually very, very strong because now he's not able to attack our king ever. And we can have some very aggressive plans. So, for example, we can now play pawn to g5, pawn to g6, king to g7, rook to h8, and then all of a sudden, we have this open file for our rook. It's going to take some time though. So, let's see. Now, another thing that we could do with the pawn cube is to play f5, knight f6, knight e4, or f5, f4. And then you're like, bro, why are you pushing pawns in front of your king? I have a pawn cube, bro. I could push this pawn all I want. I could push this pawn all I want. My king is still going to be safe. Okay, bishop f1. Bishop f1 shows class. The guy has light squared weaknesses around his king. He pulls his bishop back to guard the light square weaknesses. Class. Okay, let's continue with development. I mean, rook to e8 will always be a possibility here, but it's one of those moves that I don't necessarily have to rush. I can stay flexible because I can play rook to e8 whenever I want. So let's play a move like f5, and this is me trying to get an initiative. I'm trying to play f4 so that way I can start targeting the pawns in front of his king. So bishop to g2, again, he's covering his light squares. Now let's play pawn to f4. And yes, I am pushing pawns on the side that my king is on, but my king is still safe. So knight f6 is probably an idea in the future. Definitely going to be playing rook to e8. Okay, the move can't be bishop takes f4, bro. It can't. I think I have an idea why he does it though. He's basically saying, after I take the bishop and he takes back, and then now my queen takes, his rook gets access to my 7th rank, and rooks under 7 is in heaven. But his king side is not that's not the most attractive king side. Nobody would want to have a king side like that. But then he plays rook to e4. My friend is playing aggressive. How? Okay, let's just pull the queen back to d6. I'm fine. There's still no attack here. Even if he plays rook to h4, thinking, okay, all I need to do is put my rook on h3, put my queen on h4, and that's going to be checkmated. That's going to take him too long. And by then, he's probably going to be getting checkmated before. So I'm chill. So then he plays pawn to c3, and now I'm going to play knight f6 and attack the rook. So again, you're playing the Scandinavian. You're someone who is very solid. You're someone who doesn't want to blunder. You're someone who is good at the end game. Someone who is someone who outplays people in the end game. So rook to e8 was played. Let's now just play rook. Well, he plays rook e1. Now we play rook e8. If he takes, he gives us the file. So he should not take. What he should do is move his queen, and then if we take, he gets the fat, but obviously we're not going to take. Queen to f3, very good move because now he's connecting his rooks. And again, I'm just not going to take there. So let's just play rook to d8 here. Now all our pieces are active, and he should just never take. Taking is bad. From here, I'm trying to figure out how to continue. Maybe there's g5 followed by g4, chasing away his queen. But I think his idea is to play something like queen to g3 anyways, and then try to get the queens off the board. So I'm not going to rush that. Maybe there's knight d5. Yeah, there's definitely knight d5 because this f4 square. This f4 square is weak. So once I put my knight on the d5 square, I could put my knight on the f4 square. I could also play pawn to g5 and permanently plant my knight on f4, which is called an outpost. An outpost is a weakness. What is a weakness? A weakness is a pawn or a square, in this case a square, that can't be guarded by another pawn. Rook takes e8 is just bad. Like, come on, bro, to take is a mistake. You should know this. Now we're just going to take on e8. All of a sudden, my rook has the open file. Your rook is pointing towards your own pawn. I'm sure you had no reason to take my rook there. Only trade when it improves the activity of your pieces, not the opponent's pieces. And then king to f1 was played, and my friend who is just begging the trades, and just like that, he fell for a drawback mistake. Everyone is making drawback mistake against the Scandinavian. Like, persons blunder when you play the Scandi because you don't blunder. It's the thing is with the Scandinavian, it's hard to blunder. That's the thing. So king to f1, let's take on h2. So it's not a case where we're like, okay, I'm going to play the Scandinavian because I'm scared of not blunder. It's just hard. Like, I want to blunder, but I just can't because I'm playing the Scandi. It's just very solid. I know where all the pieces are going to go. I know the plans. I know the moves to make. How am I going to blunder? Okay, pawn c4 is not bad. Guy's attacking my knight. Plan was to play knight to f4 anyways. Definitely not gonna pull my knight back to f6. So let's play knight to f4. Now we have two pieces attacking that bishop. And then he pulls his bishop back to h1. I was just about to say I'm ahead by pawn, so I want to trade the pieces off the board, but he has some sense there. He pulls the bishop back. Does rook to e2 work here? Rook e2. I'm not even seeing what my threat is. Let's say we play rook e2, he plays d5. Maybe grab the f pawn, and then once the queen takes, we grab the bishop. Nah, that will never work. Because then he just blocks with the queen. And then we check. Ooh, and then we check. Up. And then we check. And then if he puts the king here, that's mate. If he blocks with the queen, he loses the rook. Wait. Boom, boom. Grab the f pawn. Queen takes check. King can't move, so the queen actually has to block. Queen f3 check. If king move, that's mate. Queen block, we take. Rook to e2 is definitely a move. We're currently threatening some brilliant sacrifices. So he could be possibly getting checkmated here. Plus, I'm also attacking the B pawn. So I wouldn't be surprised if he plays something like B. Nah, maybe rook to B1. If he plays rook to B1, then does it work? The whole idea of trying to checkmate him doesn't work because now he blocks with the queen and I'm not able to take his rook. But I'm fine. Like, all my pieces are just good. His pieces are just bad. And this king is weak. And I'm ahead by a pawn. Black is winning here. Okay, pawn to b3. I knew you would have played pawn to b3. It's over, guys. It's over. Rook takes f2 is probably going to be a brilliant move. So we take on f2. Queen has to take. We looked on that. I mean, if he doesn't move, if he moves the king, we take the queen. Now, if he moves the king, that's mate. So rook takes f2, queen takes f2, and this is called are removing the guard tactic because the queen no longer guards the bishop. And then obviously, you notice how I'm conducting my attack here? All my pieces are on his half of the board. So if you want to find good moves, look for moves where you put your pieces on his half of the board. If you want to find tactics, look for forcing moves. These moves are usually your checks, your captures, and your threats. Just to ensure that I'm not blundering, let's look on it again. Rook takes f2, queen takes f2, queen takes h1, king cannot move because my knight guards the square, queen has to block. Then we play queen to f3 check. King cannot go there because the queen is there. If the king goes there, that's mate. And if the queen blocks, we take the rook. And we're ahead by an entire piece. So rook takes f2, such a nice move. It's probably a brilliant move. If after this game is finished and you see the little game review thing pops up and it says I made a brilliant move, it's rook takes f2. So the queen blocks, we play queen to f3 check. If the king goes here, that's mate. And then once the queen goes to f2, we take. Okay, the king decides to go to e2, and it's just a checkmate. More Scandinavian against 1,300 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,300. More solid Scandinavian defense. So he took the pawn. Let's just play queen takes in this position. And then after knight c3, we play queen a5. We know the stuff so far. Knight f3, knight goes to f6. Regular stuff. Bishop c4, okay. Bishop goes to f5. We've seen these positions a lot. Some players like to play d3. Some players play d4. Pawn to d4 is usually a bit better here. The opponent castle the king. Now we play e6. And the plan after this is to play c6, knight d7, the bishop e7 or d6. Okay, pawn a3. As we said, there's no pawn b4 because our bishop is going to be able to take. So let's just play pawn c6 here. And here he needs to just push his pawn to d4 and finish his development. Okay, pawn d4, good move. Let's continue with knight d7 here, just developing our pieces. And I'm basically just waiting for him to put his bishop on d7 so that way I can play queen c7. Knight to h5. Now, this is important. This is very important. If the knight goes to h4 and they didn't play h3, we could get away with putting the bishop on g4 and attacking the queen because, I mean, if we pull the bishop back to g6, we lose the bishop here anyways. So might as well force them to play f3. Now look what just happens. Now he pulls his bishop back. Yes, I'm going to take because I didn't lose the bishop here. But now his knight is on the edge of the board. So he now has to waste a move to pull his knight back from h4 to f3. And that's going to save me some time. So let's continue with the plan. Bishop to d6 and then just get the king out the center of the board. Bishop to d2. Okay, we're used to this. Bishop is on the same line as the queen. Let's just pull the queen back to c7. And this is the perfect time for him to pull his knight back to f3 because At least he protects the pawn on h2, but he decides to play pawn to g3. I don't even want to castle on the king side anymore. I want to castle on the queen side and then start an attack on his king, but let's just get the king out the center of the board, because why would you play g3? You have to pull the knight back to f3 some way or the other. Okay, knight e4. One way how I like to deal with knight e4 is first we take on e4, and then once the queen takes on e4, then we replace that by putting this knight on f6, and we kind of get back the tempo on the queen. And then now that all our pieces are active, we know what the plan is. The plan is to go for a pawn break. The question is, do we play e5 or c5? In this particular position, now, pawn e5, I was about to say I like e5 because takes the bishop is good, but playing e5 leaves the f5 square unprotected and the knight is able to get to f5. So with that being said, we are still going to be going with pawn to c5. Now if he takes, we play bishop takes, that's fine. There's also queen takes, which hits this. Allows him to take on b2, but there's rook to b8, which takes this back. So it's just a nice, solid position. Very, very solid position. You know, a lot of games are going to be going into the end game. So this is also one of those videos where you get to work on your end games. So bishop to g5 was played, applying some pressure to my knight. Knight, if I put the knight on d5, there's c4. If I put the bishop back on e7, there's bishop f4. So let's actually just pull our knight back to d7 for now. If he takes eventually, I'm going to be able to put a knight on e5 in the future. If he plays c3, I takes, and then he has an isolated pawn. So I like my position. It's very solid. Pawn to d4. Wasn't expecting a move like pawn to d5 here. Because if I takes, he has queen takes. It doesn't do much though, to be honest. It really doesn't do much. So let me just use the time to just get this bishop out of my half of the board, and then I deal with the fact that maybe I need to take. And by the way, if he thinks he's being fancy and take on e6, then I'm just going to take on g5, and then if he takes, I take on h4. So he has to pull the bishop back, which he did. And then now that he pulls the bishop back, I'm thinking of knight e5, but there's always going to be something like queen g2. So let's just take on d5, and then once the queen takes on d5, we play knight f6, hit the queen. Nah. Let's play rook to d8. Let's put the rook on the same line as the queen. Again, this is a very symmetrical position, guys. Very, very symmetrical. Both players has pawns on the same side of the board, which means it's so hard for people to blunder. And this is the reason why, this video is probably long. So there's some videos that is short, like the Scotch game or the Italian game. Those videos are like maybe an hour 46. I'm not sure how long this video is going to be after it's edited and everything. Maybe it's going to be like 2.5 hours, because we have to, we have to do the end game grind as well. But it's a good way for you guys to learn your end games. So he plays rook to e1. And now I need to find somewhere for this knight. I don't want to play knight f6, because after queen to f3, he threatens bishop h6. So let's play knight b6, hits the queen. And one thing I notice is my rook is on the same line as is unprotected bishop. So if he moves his queen, I could take on g3, and then once he takes back on g3, I grab the bishop, and that would be a very nice tactic to win a pawn in this position. So let's see. All right, so the queen went all the way over to h4, so we have to be on the lookout for sack. Bishop takes g6, first move that comes to mind. What if he plays bishop takes h6? If bishop takes h6, there's a lot of stuff that I could do. I could take the knight. For starters, I could take on h2 just to win some more pawn. I can also take on f2, then take the bishop. It's very risky though. Take on g3, bishop takes h6, take on h4, maybe queen here to threaten mate first, but then I'm able to play f5. So, okay, I have to be careful. If I take here, what does he have? Any surprises? Knight f4. Let's take here. But just have to be careful. This is called a discovered attack, by the way. Notice what we did. We moved the bishop out of the way, reveals the attack on this bishop. If he simply takes back on g3, then, it makes my life easier. I just take the bishop and I'm just ahead by a pawn. But he's able to counter-sacrifice his bishop and expose my king. So that's actually where things are going to get tricky. So if he takes on h6, I take his knight. If he takes my bishop, I take his bishop. He should not be able to get a perpetual check in that scenario. He's going to be able to swing his rook in the attack though. Okay, that's fine. I mean, I could work with that. I could work with that. Knight back to f3. I was thinking about bishop takes h2, but that will never work because queen takes h2, queen takes h2, king takes h2. He's never going to move the knight. I'm ahead by a pawn. With that being said, I'm ahead by a pawn. So the goal from here is just to start trading pieces off the board. Okay, bishop f4, there's bishop c3. Should be able to play knight d5, hit the bishop at that point. So let's go bishop to f4. The goal is to start trading the pieces off the board. If he takes, I takes. My pawn on c5 is going to be unprotected, but his knight on f3 is going to be unprotected. So I'm expecting bishop c3. You have to remain principled. You're down by a pawn, don't trade. Some persons thinks it's if they're down by a piece, they shouldn't trade. But if you're down by anything at all, you should not trade. Okay, very good. Bishop to c3. And the plan here was to play, well, there's also rook d5. There is knight d5 hits the bishop, but there's rook d5 hits the queen. I'm going to go with knight d5. Nah, let's think. Rook d5, queen g4. And I'm not able to play rook to g5 because the knight is there. Knight d5, if he sack the bishop, that will never work. So let's just play knight d5. I'm ahead by a pawn, so I'm just trying to trade. Okay, now, now he wants to trade. Okay. What if I play knight to f6, hits the queen? If he moves the queen, I win the bishop. So he has to find an in-between move. Queen, bishop takes f4, and then after queen takes f4, I'm still hitting the queen, and the only score for the queen is h3. I think that's a good position for me. I mean, there's takes, knight f6. There's also takes, knight f4. I think that makes more sense because it applies pressure to his light squares. And then I'm going to be able to start swinging. Yeah, let's go with that idea. So we take on d2, knight takes d2, the knight is unprotected on the same line as my rook, which is why I'm going to play knight f4, discovered attack on the knight. He now has to move the queen somewhere where he guards the knight. Unfortunately, that square is all the way back to d1. Nobody wants to play a move like queen to d1 though. Ay, ay, ay. I think it's over. Because if the only move that he's able to play is queen d1, I hit him with queen c6. I'm not threatening checkmate on g2. How do you prevent that? And if he plays pawn to f3, we swing the queen over to g6 with check. And then once the king moves, that's checkmate. Yeah, queen c6. There's rook to e4 in this position because the knight guards the rook. But that's the thing. The knight guards the rook. So since the knight guards the rook, what we're going to do, we're going to sit the rook, get rid of the knight, then grab the rook. And that's going to be calling a removing the guard tactic. So sometimes you just have to ask yourself, never mind, never mind. But what I just said is true. Sometimes you have to ask yourself the right questions and answer them. But if he plays rook to e4, queen g6 will still lead to a checkmate. So taking the knight wins the knight. But okay, okay, Queen to g4 is very strong. I didn't see that move at all, at all, at all. Because he left his knight unprotected. If I take the knight, he takes my knight. Then I check. Hmm. What if I play... That doesn't even work, though. What if I play rook to d4? Pawn c3, there's knight d3. That doesn't even work, though. All right, we're already ahead by one. I'm seeing myself winning at least one more pawn from this. Unless I'm missing something. You guys are always embarrassing me saying, "Oh, you missed this, bro. You missed." So I don't like to miss stuff. But I don't think I'm missing anything. So let's take on d2. We're trading knights, but I'm ahead by a pawn. He took on f4 that is hanging. I'm wondering if I should throw in a check first. And I'm gonna do it because now I hit this, and if the king goes to h1, once I take f2 becomes hanging and b2 becomes hanging. And yes, my rook on f8 has not been doing anything, but I'll get the rook in the game. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Okay, king f1 I was not expecting. Now if I takes, this remains guarded. With that being said, we're gonna take with the rook to avoid any unnecessary risk. If I'm able to play a rook, okay. Rooks on the 7 is in heaven. Guy's learning some stuff, but I don't think I care. He wants the pawn, I want to mate. Let's play rook to d8. If he takes my pawn, I play rook to d2. There's no way to add more defenders to f2, even though his queen is adequate defense. But because his rooks are so far apart, I should be able to sack and then fork his rook, or find some nice ways to get my queen in the attack. It should just be bad for him, I'm sure. The guy says offense is the best defense. But That's not even too offensive because my F pawn is guarded. I don't know what you see. Look at this. Now I get my rook on his seventh rank or second rank. Now his F pawn is under attack. He's gonna be getting checkmated. Yes, he could give me a little one check. That's just a little one check. I'm just gonna move my king. So he has to pull the queen back. And then I'm considering the sack. Okay, yeah. Queen. Oh, come on, bro. You blundered your queen, man. You were doing so well. But let's just assume that he didn't blunder his queen and he had played something like queen f4. The plan was to sack on f2. And then once the king takes, I play queen f6 and I fork it back. But in this case, we're just going to grab the queen and he's going to resign. And he resigns. More Scandinavian against 1,400 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,400. Let's play some more Scandinavian defense. Ooh, pawn to d3. Bro thinks he's Magnus Carlsen. Only Magnus get away with these types of moves. This is a mistake, by the way, guys. Like a lot of games is going into the end games this video, which is why the video is so long. You know, if you're still watching, you know, hit that like button. But let's just take on e4 because okay, he didn't take. He played d4. What's bro doing? Is this charity or something? You just give him the pawn like that? Okay, just play knight f6. I don't mind. A pawn is a pawn at the end of the day. Now he plays g3 because he wants to play bishop g2. Well, let's just. Now I'm going to play bishop g4. Now I'm going to play bishop g4 because I want to make it uncomfortable for him to play bishop g2 because I'm attacking his queen. And if he plays knight e2, I go bishop f3. So he kind of has to play bishop to e2. And then, okay, I'm ahead by a piece, so I want to trade. Plus, because he plays g3, he's also going to have light square weaknesses around his king. Okay, there's also queen to d2. But now we just develop normally. Knight c6, develop the knight, tempo on the pawn. We have two attackers. He has one defender. If he plays pawn c3, we hit him with pawn to e5. So he decides to play h3, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, the guy's neutralizing the bishop, which is on his half of the board, and I have to move the bishop. But let's just pull the bishop back. And if g4, I pull the bishop back again. Okay, that's fine. I mean, he still has to defend his d4 pawn at the end of the day, though. Maybe he plays g5. Okay, he plays knight c3. Now it's really just charity. Where is he from? Sudan. Come on, Isam. Because now I take the free pawn. San, let's just take the free pawn, bro. Now we're up 2 pawns. So I'm gonna trick him. This has to work. Knight takes c2 is a fork. It doesn't work though because his queen guards c2. So you know what I'm gonna hit him with? I'm gonna hit him with pawn to e3, which is a discovered attack on the c2 pawn, but it also attacks his queen. So once he moves the queen or take the pawn, then I play knight takes c2 because c2 is gonna be guarded. It's gonna work. He's not. Yeah, I knew Asan wasn't seeing that because Asan think we're running a charity business over here. We started the game. He gave me a free pawn, and then he gave me another one. Nah, bro, this is not GG's. We're gonna grab your rook next move, and if you take with the queen, you lose the queen. So what are you gonna lose? Your queen or your rook? San. No, it's Isam. Same thing. Same thing. So he took with the pawn. That's a check. King now has to move. And then we grab the rook. I mean, we're ahead by an entire Hassan. Hassan. What if I take here with check Isam? Because the queen is pinned. The thing is though, he's gonna play king to d2. He's gonna play king d2. Maybe I trade the queen and then take the bishop. But why take a bishop when we're able to just take a rook? Yeah, let's just take the rook. Then he take my rook. Oh, and then he's also threatening this. So what I'm gonna do is, what am I gonna do? Oh, son. All right, I'm ahead by I have 6 points. Let's not be too greedy now. Let's not be too greedy. We play e5. We give Isam the rook. If he takes, we take back, hit his rook. He has to find rook a2. We're still ahead by a ton of material. We develop our bishop, castle the king. We have no problems, right? Yeah, let's not be too mean. Let's not be too mean. Isam. I actually was afraid of that move. Like I bet everything that he wasn't gonna find the move and he found it, which is kind of crazy. I can't believe he found that move. I think I have to block with the knight. If I move my king, it's just weird. So I have to block with the knight. Then he takes the rook. I mean, it doesn't really do much though. If he takes the rook, then it's literally the same thing. I'm still going to develop, still going to castle. So I'm chill. Okay, now he took the rook. Let's take hit his rook. I'm expecting rook a2, maybe pawn e4. Yeah, rook a2 was played. And let's just play bishop to b4, develop the bishop, pin the knight. Plan is to castle, get all the pieces in the game, and checkmate Isam's king. Sam, queen d5. You're trading, bro. You're trading, and I have 4 points than you. Okay. All right. So instead of taking and allowing his knight to hit my bishop and threaten this far, I'm just going to castle my king. And yes, it has a drawback. My knight is no longer guarded, but rook to d8 wins his queen. So he's not going to take that. And because he's being so generous, I'm just going to take back the queen. And we're just going to be ahead by 4 points. Not going to lie to anybody, though. Not going to lie. My knight is trapped. If I'm able to get my knight out of that corner, then it's like a confirmed plus 4 points. But no, it's not a confirmed plus 4 points. But 4 points is still 4 points at the end of the day. Okay, bishop to d2. It's fine. I think he wants to take, but he basically just puts his bishop in the way first. Um, Knight c2. If he takes, I go here. And then once the queen moves, I take with check. Doesn't get anything. But I'm just going to take on c3 because I'm ahead by 4 points. So I'm just trying to trade the queens off the board. And I know you guys know that bishops are better than knights, but I don't mind because I'm ahead by 4 points. And based on how things look, I'm going to be getting my knight out of there. Plus, he has to trade queens now because it was kind of like a removing the guard tactic. So let's take back. And now once he takes, okay, if I get my knight out of there, no, he sacked the rook, and okay, we're winning, but it's not too winning. But his next move is b3 actually. So let me start with rook to d8. Let me put my rook on the same line as his king first. Once he plays b3, okay, Sam. No, my knight is just out. Oh wait, yeah, no, it's just out. Can't go here though, or here. Okay, knight f3. Let's play f6. It's still very tricky. Still very, very tricky. Let's guard the pawn. My knight is not able to come out just yet. And if I, okay, he's going to play h5. We don't care. We don't care. Let's play knight c5. Let's keep all our pieces active. Knight a4 is coming to hit the bishop. And if he hits my bishop, I check his king, then hit him with knight a4 and just trading. That's all we're doing. We're trading, trading, trading. You're ahead by a piece, just trade. Okay, hits the bishop. Let's give a check, force his king to move. All right, the plan was to play knight a5, grab the bishop, but because he puts the king on f2, we're going to play knight e4 and check the king. Because now his king is forced to move, and then we're going to take the bishop. Especially if he plays king g2, which is what he did. No, we take and then play bishop to e4. And this is now trading more pieces off the board because it doesn't matter what he plays next. All right, I want to take the knight, but isn't rook to d3 just better? Okay, rook d3. If he takes my knight, I take his pawn. Hits the rook. If rook f2, I take this pawn, then this pawn. And that's what conversion is. So let's hit him with rook to d3 first. And I'm basically sacrificing the knight to enter a winning king and pawn endgame. So if he takes the knight, I take his pawn, pin his knight. Maybe he thinks he's able to go back to f2. But before I take, we take on c6. And then once he tries to get out of the pin, we take on f3. And we're going to have like 12 pawns and he's going to have like 3. So he took, we take here. His rook is under attack. I'm also applying pressure to the pinned knight. He thinks he's able to play rook f2, but I don't take just yet. I take on c6. The funny thing is, it's very hard for him to get out of this pin. And what have I taught you guys? Whenever you're pinning a piece like this, you do not take the piece, especially if you're able to take the piece. Don't take the piece until they try to get out of the pin. And if he tries to get out of the pin by playing king g2, he's now in the pin of my bishop. So I'm probably going to push this pawn all the way up to c4 before I even take. And then once he takes back, I play c3. Well, he's still going to be able to enter the box. So we're just going to be patient about it. So he moves the king, doesn't change anything. Let's just roll the pawn because the knight is still pinned. So there's actually, I'm not seeing what he could do. The best he could do is to actually sacrifice the knight. Don't allow the king and pawn endgame and just play some more chess. But honestly, though, I think it was actually best for me to get into the king and pawn endgame because it's a guaranteed win. Even if I'm playing up the knight, like something could still happen. So pawn to h6. The Desperados has begun. Let's just play pawn to c4 with the same idea. And again, we do not take until he tries to escape the pin. If he takes, I have a very nice move, which will win the game. Taking on f3 and then pushing the pawn just wins. So he took, and here's how I'm going to win. Instead of takes, then push the pawn, it doesn't work because his king enters the square. So I will take with the rook, and then once he takes with his rook is going to be pinned. But what did I tell you guys? If you're pinning someone's rook, don't be in a rush to take it. Let them try to get out of the pin first. So once his rook takes, then I push the pawn. His king is not going to be in the square. Then once he moves the king, it's when I take the rook. And then once he takes the bishop, I play c2. I have a queen on the board, and I win the game. Okay, so he took with the rook. Let's play c3. Then when he moved the king, that's when we take the rook. And then after the king takes, we play pawn c2. Now we're just going to put a queen on the board. But Isam resigns. More Scandinavian against 1,500 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,500, some more solid Scandinavian. And he takes the pawn, and obviously we take with the queen. Now, I like to see this. Like this guy, the last time he played against me, he was actually representing the 1400s. This is what I want to see. I don't want to be playing the same person, and for the past 5 games we played, you're still at the same ratings. This is what I want to see. So pawn to d4, and now we're going to be playing the move knight to f6. Like this is one of the simplest ways to play the Scandinavian, to be honest, because we already know where all the pieces belong. Now, Tushar usually puts his bishop on g4 and then he takes the knight. Personally speaking, I don't want to be giving up my bishops for knight. So I'm going to be choosing to put the bishop on f5 instead of putting the bishop on g4. And whenever we see this bishop on d2, this is the, like, this is how you guys could go wrong because the bishop is on the same line as the queen. So please play the move pawn to c6 so that way you could pull your queen back to c7 once they do a discovered attack. So bishop to c4 was played. And okay, there's the bishop is pointing towards the f7 pawn. So we're going to play pawn to e6 to deal with this. And yes, this is a bit uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to everyone, to be honest. So once you see that, you don't have to do it, by the way, but I'm gonna do it so that way, it's just a very easy concept for you guys. So you play c6, the bishop is on the same line as your queen, you pull the queen back to c7. Now it's very simple. Okay, bishop goes to e7 or d6, bishop d6 would have been fine. I think the dark squared bishop is the only piece where it just doesn't literally just goes to a certain square because all the other pieces it's just literally one square that they go to. For example, this knight is going here. Now a move that I like to include, I just like to include this move. You don't have to do it, by the way. So you could just play knight d7 and castle here, but you're gonna be seeing knight h4 if you don't play h6. So h6 is not necessarily to prevent the bishop from going to g5. It's so in case the knight goes to h4, you're able to hide the bishop on h7. Now pawn to a4 was played. He plays a4 because he wants to prevent b5. We're not necessarily going to be playing b5, to be honest. So let's just continue with our plan, knight d7. Now, if he plays a5 here, then that would be an interesting move because obviously we want to play knight b6 to d5. But my next move is just to get my king out the center of the board. And my fellow opponent just played the move queen to c1. Now, I know why he played queen c1. He's obviously trying to sacrifice his bishop on h6. But that's not how it works, sir. Personally speaking, I don't have to castle. But I'm going to castle because I want him to sacrifice his bishop. Oh, or maybe he wants to put the bishop on f4. The guy's 1500. He's not going to sacrifice his bishop. And this is another reason, guys, why I tell you that, sometimes the bishop could go on d6. So if you... Okay, here's how to look on it. Put your bishop on e7 if they play bishop g5. Put your bishop on d6, if you can, because d6 is usually a bit more active and it also points towards h2. And you also don't waste the tempo of putting your bishop on e7, then putting your bishop on d6. So that's just something to keep in mind. But, the plan here is still simple. A rook is going to d8 or c8 or maybe e8, depending on what happens. And we know the plan with this knight, b6 to d5. It's very, very simple. Knight to e5 is a very interesting move because he's just trying to hold this e5 square. So I have 1, 2, 3 attackers. He has 1, 2, 3 defenders, which means we're not going to be taking on e5. Because if we take on e5, that's a fork, and we're not going to be giving up our bishop for a knight. Now, knight b6 I like because it immediately hits the bishop, and the knight is going to d5. We still need to ensure that we're aware of any sacrifices, but we're not scared. So let's just continue with the plan. Knight b6 hits the bishop, and then the next move is knight d5 to hit this bishop or trade this knight. And whenever they take on d5, if they take on d5, I like to play c d5 so that way it opens the c file for the rook, and then everything is just nice after that. So the bishop went back to b3, and now we go knight to d5. It's very, very simple. Okay, one thing I did not look on was, what if he decides to give up his bishop for the knight? If he had taken with the bishop and I take with the c pawn, there would have been knight b5 which would have been an annoying move, but he didn't. So let's just take with the c pawn, having this very nice pawn structure. Like, look on this pawn structure. It can't get better than this. I mean, I think he's gonna play pawn to c3, which is usually how you just solidify the pawn chain. And then my long-term plan is gonna be to play a6, b5, b4. And the fact that he has this pawn on a4 is also good for him. But let's see how he continues. The c file is open, so a rook is definitely going to the c file. Which one of the rooks do I put on the c file? Not 100% sure, but a rook is going on the c file. Okay, so pawn to f3 was played. Not bad. He's trying to prevent my knight from going to the e4 square. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Here's what we're gonna do. Here's what we're gonna do. I like the whole idea of playing queen to b6 to hit the unprotected pawn. But rook still needs files. Now, the thing is, I'm just not sure which one of the rooks to put on the file. Like, if I put the a rook on the file, what is this f rook gonna do? That's what I'm thinking about. But then if I put the f rook on the file, what is this a rook gonna do? The reason why I chose the f rook, by the way, is because I may play a6 b5, and if I do play a6 b5, then at least this rook is going to be on a file. So for now, we have three attackers on it on c2. He has two defenders on c2, but pawn to c3 is very obvious here. So he did find pawn to c3, and okay, we have a very solid position. And I'm going to continue with pawn to a6. Simple plan. A lot of you guys are always asking, when do we start the pawn storm? It's get all your pieces active first, then you can start pushing the pawn. So that's what I'm doing. And then for that person who's going to be like, okay, bro, but your rook on a8 is not active. Why are you pushing pawns? I'm trying to activate my rook on a8. Like, there's no other ways to activate the rook on a8. Like, I can't even put two rooks on the c file because my queen is already on c7, and I'm also not trying to waste too much time. Another plan that I have is to put my knight on d7 to just neutralize this knight, because that's a very strong knight. Bishop back to c2 was played. Very strong move, by the way. And now I'm just going to take on c2. And then once he plays queen takes c2, now we continue with the plan of pawn to b5. Now, I'm just double checking to ensure that I'm not blundering. Ensure that you're always looking on the opponent's forcing moves. Any possible captures that the opponent has, you should be looking out for them. Now, if he trade rooks, that's fine, because my rook gets the file. Pawn to b4 is now what I want to play, and this is called a minority attack. By the way, that's the whole point. You have less pawns versus more pawns, and then the plan is to play b4, eventually take on c3, and I'm either going to be winning the pawn on c3, or he's just going to have a backward pawn on c3, while my structure is just going to be so good. So he decides to play queen to d3. Fair enough. Let's continue with the plan. Pawn to b4. And if he decides to take and then my bishop takes, he has an isolated pawn on b2 and he has an isolated pawn on d4. So this is just a very solid way to play the Scandinavian. Think about someone like Anatoly Karpov. That's how we're playing like. So he trades rook, which is fine. Let's just stay back. Now my rook gets the file, but I have a feeling he wants to play rook to c1, which is a decent move. Okay, it's not a bad move at all, sir, because now if I take, that's not a bad move. Because now if I take, the bishop is on the same line as my queen. So I'm basically trying to see if there's any discovered attacks. I don't think there's any though, because the bishop is unprotected. So literally anywhere he puts the knight, I'll take the bishop, except if he puts the knight on g6. And if he puts the knight on g6, let's just say I put the queen on b6, and then his knight is going to be under attack. So I think his whole idea is to play rook to c1 to attack my queen, which is not a bad move, by the way. But now I'm going to play something like, let's say, queen to b6 to target d4. Now, queen to b6, there's rook c6, knight c6. Hmm. Let's go with queen to let's go with queen to b7 here. So now the plan is to target his isolated pawn on b2. Now white is playing fine. I think black has a nice position though. I don't think I'm winning, but the fact that he has this weak pawn on b2 and the isolated pawn on d4, that's what I'm working with, which means if I'm able to go into an endgame here, I should be able to do one of those Magnus grind. But apart from that, the guy has a very annoying knight on e5 that we need to deal with. Maybe knight d7 and just capture on e5 is an idea. Queen to b6, also a very annoying move. Guy's playing some chess, to be honest. Guy's definitely playing some chess. And it means my bishop is pinned. And because the bishop is pinned, he's trying to apply pressure to the pinned bishop. So maybe because the queen no longer guards d4, I'm assuming now's the time to attack d4, but then knight c6 guards d4 and attack my bishop. Okay, let's think about it. Queen b6, knight c6, bishop c5. And then when I hit him with bishop c5, I hit the queen and I hit the pawn. He's not able to take my bishop because his queen hangs. And if he takes my queen, I take back. The knight is going to be here, and his pawn on d4 is going to be hanging. Not, not, I mean, there's also just bishop back to e3. Bishop back to e3 is also fine. There's a lot of stuff that he's able to do here. But let's try queen to b6. And this is just me trying to break the pin in a very simple way. Like, remember, guys, like once you have a piece that is pinned, you should try to get out of that pin as quickly as possible. And this is actually my first time looking on the clock. I have 3 minutes 36 on the clock. I'm expecting knight c6 or bishop e3. I think he's going to play bishop e3. Okay, so he did play knight c6, applying pressure to my bishop. Bishop c5 is now the move that I want to play. So let's say bishop c5 and he checks. If he checks, I just move the king. I'm chilling. We can't take, by the way, because we lose the queen. Bishop c5 hits the queen, hits the pawn. Okay, there's one thing that he could do, though, which is to move the queen and protect the pawn. But at least at that point, my bishop is no longer pinned. So here, 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 and we are fine. So let's go bishop c5. We have 3 minutes on the clock. The guy's playing some chess, guys. Like, this guy's improving at chess. The last time we played, the guy was 1400. Now he's 1500. You know, he says his rating is improving because of me. So I'm also a very proud coach. But, I'm going to have to beat you again, sir. Like, it's not the time to beat me when you're 1500. Get to at least 2000 before you start thinking about that. Okay, so he traded queens. Let's just stay back. And now he has two weak pawns. That's what I'm saying. And do I have any weaknesses? I literally has no weaknesses in my position. Let's not use the word literally. I mean, I have an unprotected bishop and an unprotected rook, which is not coordinated. So, you could call that a weakness. But I don't have any weaknesses in my position. Pawn to b4. Pass pawns must be pushed. Like, oh, this is what happens when I let you guys challenge me in a man. You guys are challenging me. I should be playing against strangers who doesn't know how to play chess. Okay. Rook to a2 is what I'm thinking of. Just put the rook on the second rank. Rook on the 7 is in heaven. And I'm also trying to put my rook behind the pass pawn. Remember, guys, the rook belong behind the pass pawn. It doesn't matter if it is your pawn or if it's the opponent pawn. Rook belong behind the pass pawn. So that's my plan here. Which means if he plays rook to b1, then I don't know. I don't know. Okay, I want to see how the game is really gonna end, but it looks like he's using up a lot of time now, which is kind of sad. Which I'm probably gonna have to flag him. Come on, bro, just play. You can't blunder here. This move, rook to b1, maybe knight e7 check, and then try to swing your no, maybe not moving the knight because it's guarding the pawn. King h2 is not bad. Okay, so what he did was he moves his king off the same diagonal as my bishop. Again, the guy's playing some chess. All right, if I play rook to, let's play rook to b2. Rook belong behind the pass pawn. Now, I'm also giving up the a file, but I have a little idea. If he puts his rook on the a file, I go rook c2, hit the knight. And then if he moves the knight, he loses the pawn on d4 because, again, he has a weak pawn. My knight on f6 isn't really doing much, by the way. Like, if you oof, God, that's a nice move. He wants to play bishop to c5. Whoa, that's a nice move. Okay, I think I need to get my knight here then. If he's going to put his bishop here. Maybe once he puts his bishop here, I'm going to check his king. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And then when the king moves, I play bishop f4, hit the rook. So let's just play knight h4. So that way, if bishop c5, I check, and then knight f4, and then I'm going to be winning the pawn, and then his time is also running out. So bishop c5. Now we check. There's also knight to there's no knight e5 because there's f6. So now that he moves the king, and I think now he's unfortunately losing, but the guy played very well. I mean, I'm threatening to fork and I'm threatening g2. This is how you win with the Scandinavian though. You just don't make any blunders, play solid. Your opponent is going to try to attack you, and because you have no weaknesses, you're gonna be able to just not lose, and their attack is not gonna work. They're gonna be burning a lot of time as well. So he moves the king, which means he did not get forked, but he did lose the pawn on g2. So we're finally ahead by a pawn, and I'm gonna say it's because of the time. Like I'm gonna say it's because of the time. The guy played very well. So he moves the rook, giving a check here. Yeah, let's give a check here. Oh, no, 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 no. I have a little trick though. If I check and the king moves, that's actually mate. The issue is if I check, there's king here. And then when I check, there's king here. So I'm actually going to put the bishop on h2. So that way, once I check, the king is not able to go to g1. And then the king is going to be forced to go to e1. Then I'm going to play bishop to g3. And that's going to be a checkmate. Now, if he checks, I'm just going to move the king. I think it's best for him to put the rook here, which, he didn't. With that being said, this is now just checkmate in two moves. Knight to e3 check, forcing the king to go here. And then once the king go here, there's bishop here, and that's mate. But bro, if we see this guy at 1600 the next time we play, I will not be surprised. That's just checkmate. More Scandinavian against 1600 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1600. Let's play the scam opening. That's what Tushar calls it. And this is what he plays with the black pieces, by the way. So if you watch Tushar a lot, then I'm sure he teaches the line, but this is exactly how he plays the line. So pawn d4, we go knight f6. The bishop goes to f5. What do we do when the bishop goes to d2? We play c6. We actually don't care about any discovered attack that the knight has. And again, like if you're a higher rated player, please think about what I'm about to say. If your rating is high, or even if your rating is not high, you are not forced to play queen c7. Only if your rating is a bit low and sometimes you forget stuff, then you should just pull your queen back to c7, so that way you're fine. But apart from that, just play bishop f5, play e6, play bishop d6, play knight d7, leave your queen on a5. You don't necessarily have to pull it back. And then when he moves the knight, then you move the queen. But, we have a lot of persons who is watching. We have some low-rated persons watching as well. So let's just pull the queen back to c7, keeping the same plan. And then we're going to play bishop to f5. So bishop c4, let's go bishop f5, so that way we're able to play e6. Immediate knight e5 was played. That's a good move because he's putting pressure on f7. And now that I play e6 to guard f7, I think pawn to g4 is just so strong, because if he plays pawn to g4 to hit my bishop and I pull the bishop back to g6, he's able to play knight takes g6. And again, it's not the end of the world. It's because I'm a higher rated player and I value my bishop over my knight. So I'm willing to invest a move like h6 just to ensure that I'm able to hide my bishop on h7. If you're a low-rated player, it's fine. Just knight d7, bishop d6 castle, and then anytime the bishop is under attack, just pull it back to g6, take with the h-pawn. The goal of the Scandi is to play solid. We're playing very solid. Bishop to f4, aha. This is what I tell you guys. When the bishop goes to g5, feel free to play bishop e7. But the bishop is now on f4, so we play bishop to d6. So that way we don't have to be worried about any discovered attacks. All right, so he got his king out the center of the board. Let me just get my king out the center of the board first. I was thinking about knight d7, which is fine, but let me just get my king out the center of the board first. Pawn, yo, he's playing just like the 1500 guy. Pawn to a4 to prevent b5. All right, so do we play knight d7 now to say development is complete? Yes. I was about to say let's play h6, so that way if g4, I pull back to h7, but I don't think he's going to be pushing pawns on the side that his king is on, to be honest. So he moves the queen to apply some defense to his knight. 1, 2, 3 defense, 1, 2, 3 attack. So we don't really have anything. So let's just continue with the plan. Knight b6 hits the bishop. And then once the bishop goes back, the knight goes to d5 to hit this bishop. And usually they always take on d5. Remember what I just explained to you guys in the 1500 game. If they take with the bishop, I don't recommend that you take with the c pawn, because there's knight to b5, which forks the queen and the bishop. So if he takes with the bishop, just take with the e pawn and you're fine. Okay, my guy decided to pull the bishop back to g3, which means he's basically saying he's willing to have doubled pawns. He's willing to have doubled pawns. Look at that. Let's double up those pawns. Guy's willing to have double pawns. And you know what the good thing is? I'm able to play knight to e5, which hits the bishop, and it immediately starts attacking his doubled pawn. So let's go for that. So at least it looks like we're going to be getting the bishop here. So that's not bad. I think he's going to play pawn c4, maybe queen e3. Pawn c4 makes the most sense. I mean, the guy's 1643. It's the first time I'm playing against Chess Kid Hanoi from Canada. Okay, queen to e3 was played. Now I could take the bishop. If I take the I could take the bishop, but my knight is actually not too bad on e4. But I think eventually he's going to be able to play f3 and chase away my knight, though. Okay, why not just play pawn to c5 in this position? If we play pawn to c5, he takes, I take it the queen, and I'm fine. Let's play pawn to c5. And this is one of the crucial breaks in the Scandinavian as well. Like, you can always play moves like pawn to c5 or pawn to e5, because now if he takes, I takes, and I also have some ideas of taking here, and then if no, if he takes on c5, maybe he's blundering his knight on e5 as well. So that's something that he has to keep in mind. Pawn to a4. Okay, pawn to a4. I'm not sure why. Maybe he wants to play a6. I'm not sure. But if I take, he takes with the pawn, undoubles his pawn. I don't see what I get. If I takes, he takes with the pawn. And then if I takes, or maybe he's saying if I take everything and then play c4, he's able to put his bishop on the a4 square. So that's actually not bad. So I guess it's time for us to start thinking about our major pieces. So let's go ahead and play the move rook to c8. Taking the bishop on g3, if you're suggesting to play that move, it's always going to be a good move. Pawn a6, I like pawn b5, but it's kind of reckless. So I'm going to play pawn b6. This pawn on a6 could be a weakness for him in the endgame because it's an advanced pawn, or I like to call it overexerted pawn instead of an advanced pawn, because an advanced pawn is a pawn that has been advanced. If you move the pawn one square, then it's called an advanced pawn. So it's an overexerted pawn. Knight to c4 was played. He pulls the knight back to c4. Okay, let's say we take with the knight. He takes with the pawn. My bishop is going to be under attack. I take on d4. Okay, what's happening here? What if I take with the bishop so that way Nah, I don't think that makes any sense. I'm actually just going to take. Let's just take with the knight. Okay, Oh, he took with the f pawn. This whole time he was thinking about taking with the f pawn. Personally, I think that's a mistake. I understand that it opens the file for the rook, but you don't really want to be taking away from the center of the board. You want to be taking towards the center of the board. And especially since his queen and his king is on the same diagonal here, I want to keep my bishop here, to be honest. Let's pull the bishop back. I want to keep the bishop here. And then I'm going to probably play rook to d8, bishop to g6 to keep everything nice and tight. And I'm thinking about b5. b5 is going to... Wait, b5 is a... No. Wait. Okay, so he played rook to e1 because he's threatening rook takes g6, all right? What if I play b5? No. If I play b5 now and he plays rook takes f5, then I just ignore it and then take his knight. So if I play b5 now, he has to find somewhere for the knight. So pawn b5, let's say knight e5. Then I hit him with pawn to c4. And then the bishop has to go to a2, which is a removing the guard tactic because c2 is no longer guarded. And then we grab the pawn on c2. That's a pawn, sir. That's a pawn. Yup, that's a pawn. Let's hit him with b5. Guy's playing very well, by the way, but we're very solid. And I am aware of the whole idea that the queen and the rook is on the same line. The queen and the rook is pointing towards my bishop, which is only being guarded by my queen. And my rook on f8 is not yet doing anything, but pawn is a pawn at the end of the day. Knight e5, pawn c4, bishop a2, bishop c2. And then we're just going to grind out this endgame. Plus, he also has an overexerted pawn. You see what we're doing with the Scandinavian? We're just playing solid and we're just jotting down all the little slight advantages that we have. First slight advantage, bishop here. Okay, I didn't see that move. I wasn't expecting him to put the knight on a3. It just attacks my pawn. So if I play pawn to c4, no. If I play pawn to c4, this is either winning a piece or I'm blundering something. Wait, what if I take? I could also take it the queen, and if he takes back, I take. So takes it the queen, he takes. And then queen b6, he takes. No, takes the queen, he takes. Queen b6, knight takes. Or pawn c4, hit the bishop, takes it the queen, and then queen a5 hit the knight. So now the knight and the bishop is under attack, which means he's probably still want to play rook takes f5. If rook takes f5, it protects the knight. So we take the rook, he takes the bishop, and then at that point, we grab this bishop and we're chilling, right? Yeah, let's go pawn to c4. It's very tricky though. So knight takes was played. Now we play queen to a5. That's what we said. Now the bishop is under attack. The knight is under attack. If rook takes f5, we take the rook. And if he takes my bishop, I take his bishop. And then this knight is going to be under attack. And I have 3 minutes on the clock, so I need to pay attention. Um, okay, there's also one move that I didn't see, which is queen e5. Because if queen e5, now queen e5 cannot work because I'm able to play bishop f6 at the queen. But I was saying queen e5, and if I take his bishop, he takes, and then if I takes, he takes. But then his knight is still gonna be hanging. I think I'm winning. To be honest. Okay, so knight takes a2 was played. Oh god, my rook is under attack. What? Seriously? Okay, take the bishop. No, no, no. We're gonna play rook a2. Playing rook a2 also guards this bishop, so that's nice. So let's go rook c7. Rook c7 hits the knight. Guy counterattacks my queen, but he's always going to have two pieces under attack. That's the good thing. So I'm going to play queen to d5 here. Once I play queen to d5, there's no more attack. And his knight is under attack and his bishop is under attack. So, okay, we're not winning the game. He's finding a lot of moves that I did not see though. So that's something, but we're winning the game. He's currently ahead by 2 pawns, which means let's just say he sacrificed his bishop. No, not his bishop. His knight, his knight is also looking trapped, to be honest. But what I wanted to say is if he just loses the piece and then get 1 pawn for it, then from a material perspective, the position is equal, you know? But the guy's knight looks trapped, to be honest. Like if he moves the knight, I'm just going to take it. And then his bishop is still going to be under attack. I think his plan, though, is to roll this pass pawn. So I'm probably going to play rook to a8 to try to block that pass pawn. Okay, so he did decide to play knight to b5. My rook is under attack, so let's just grab the knight. And now his bishop is under attack. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays pawn to a7, because if I take the bishop, he's going to promote to a queen. What if I sack my rook? Nah, that doesn't, that will just not work. So let's just defend against that pass pawn. Let's just play rook to a8. Now we have 2 pieces attacking the pawn. He only has his rook guarding the pawn, plus his bishop is under attack. There's queen to f3 here, which is it's definitely a move which he found, because now he's hitting my rook, so I'm still not able to take the bishop. And I'm trying to play queen d5, but then after queen takes, my bishop is going to be hanging. With that being said, queen to b7 is what I like. I still hit the queen. If he no, that doesn't work. Because then after takes, he has bishop takes. But then at least I'm able to take the pass pawn, though. That's a strong pass pawn. That's a strong pass pawn. What can I do here? Because if I pull the rook back, let's say I pull the rook back, he's just going to move the bishop. I prefer to play with the extra piece and just take the pass pawn. Yeah, so let's do that. Queen b7. He takes, I takes. The rook is no longer going to be guarding the pawn, but at least I'm going to be able to take his pass pawn. You know, I'm going to be working with that. And the good thing is, his bishop is no longer going to be guarding the pawn on c2. So I'm also going to be gaining a tempo on his c2 pawn, assuming he sees that I'm attacking the pawn. So now we takes, bishop takes. I want to take on c2, but let's not complicate the game. Let's just take on a7. We're ahead by a piece. He has 2 pawns for the piece. I only have 1 minute on the clock, and this guy's playing very fast. I think he wants to flag me. So we also have to play a bit fast now. Okay, he moves his rook. He's going for this trick, but I knew he was going to forget that his pawn is under attack. So let's take. And by the way, guys, please be ensure that you're aware of this trick. Like when they sacrifice on f5, or maybe even put a knight on f5, and because your bishop on e7, sometimes it's even unprotected on f7. Okay, so pawn to d5 was played, which means if I take, okay, I can take. No, I can't take. Okay, maybe I should let me just attack the bishop. Takes. Yeah, let's hit the bishop. I have no time on my clock. I have 50 seconds on the clock, and he's playing fast. Okay, if he moves the bishop, where's he gonna put the bishop though? Because I was about to say if he moves the bishop, I take. What if he just takes? Didn't see that. Take the bishop. Takes with check. I go here. Takes, takes. Rook takes. No, after rook takes, I check. And then once the king move, I takes, and I'm fine. Because my rook is kind of defending f7 through an x-ray. So rook to f4 was played instead to guard the bishop. So now I'm going to play bishop to g5, takes. Ah, okay, I'm going to play pawn g5 just to ensure that we don't have any, background issues. I'm under pressure though. Oh, I thought he did blunder. Because, no, yes, he did blunder because the rook and the king is on the same line. So now we hit him with bishop to c5. Nice. So I'm going to be playing with an extra rook here. So I can't lose this. 30 seconds, more than enough time. This guy's not bad at chess, but I think he needs to calm down. You know, like if you have more time than someone, I mean, obviously the plan is to flag them, but this is actually where you should start playing good moves. You see? Now he's not only going to lose one piece, he's going to lose two pieces because his bishop is still unprotected. So now I take, and then once the king, no, that doesn't make any sense because if I take, see, push. Backside. Okay, we have to just be quiet now. We have to just be quiet. Let's hit the bishop. That's nice because now I can try to apply pressure to his bishop and then force the bishops off the board or force the rooks off the board. Yeah, this is winning. I can't lose this. But 15 seconds though. I'm gonna have to take his pieces, take his pawns, and deliver a checkmate. Funny enough, I think he's the one who's gonna get flagged. So he plays rook up, hit my bishop. I just apply more pressure to his bishop. So if he takes my bishop, I take his bishop. And once the bishops are off the board, it's easier to force the rooks off the board. Oh, he also got, you see, I tell you, this is just mate, bro. You need to be calm. You see, no, yes, I have no time on my clock, but that's just a checkmate, brother. More Scandinavian against 1,700 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,700. Let's play some very solid Scandinavian. So they take, we play queen takes, and everybody plays knight c3. Okay, someone is playing knight to f3. Now, if they don't play knight c3 and attack your queen, don't move the queen, then you're just wasting time. So let's just play knight f6. If he decides to attack the queen, which he did, now you move the queen, and it transposes into the exact thing that we're doing. So bishop goes to c4, bishop goes to f5, so that way we're able to play pawn c6. Now he decides to play pawn to d3. Personally, it's best if the pawn is on d4, but let's just continue with the plan. Pawn to e6. Everybody puts a bishop on d2, but once the bishop goes to d2, we put the pawn on c6, pull the queen back to c7. So he decides to castle the king. Let's just play c6 now. So that way, the moment the bishop goes to d2, we just pull it back. All right, I don't know why he plays pawn to a3. Whenever they play pawn to a3, don't be afraid of pawn to b4 because you can actually take on b4. And if they take on b4, you grab the rook. So I'm actually going to play knight d7 and just bait him to play pawn to b4. And then that would actually be very funny, Mr. 1700, blundering your pawn like that. Yeah, he's from Bermuda. Okay, bishop is on e3, which means, okay, pawn to b4 is now something, to be honest. Pawn b4 is now something. I'm gonna put my bishop on d6 just because it's a bit more active when it's on d6. If he plays b4, I'm just gonna pull the queen back. And I'm trying to castle here, by the way. One thing I want you guys to keep in mind, I don't think I've mentioned this, but or maybe I did. If the knight goes to h4, you don't necessarily have to always go back to g6. You could actually play bishop g4. But no, once he plays h3, knight g4 could be a threat. So he plays h3, I'm going to play h6. So it's not like we're wasting any time. And again, if he plays b4, I'm going back to c7. The plan is to castle knight b6, knight d5. Like, you guys, I'm sure you guys don't want anything simpler than this. Maybe I need to castle my king. Okay, knight d4, I was seeing knight d4 appearing on the chessboard, which is something that you have to be careful about because there could be some sacrificial ideas on g6. But for now, it should not be working. So let's just pull the bishop back to g6. Pulling the bishop back to h7 is fine, but putting the bishop on g6 is more flexible because at least you could say you could go back to f7, you protect f7, you could go to h5. And now he plays knight to b6 to hit the queen. Where do we put the queen? c7. Very simple chess. Next move is to get the king out the center of the board, knight b6 to d5. And if you're a low-rated player watching and you've been watching all the way up to this point, by the way, please like the video. Just hit like, helps a lot. But I want you just hope that you guys are able to be guessing the moves that I'm playing because it's very simple in this line. You know, it's very, very simple how you're going to be playing the pieces, and it's very simple exactly what you're going to be doing with each of the pieces. So queen to e2 was played. Queen is also on the same line as the king. It's about time we get that king out the center of the board, and then knight b6 to d5 is coming next. Oh, oh no, I'm sorry. No, guys, I'm so sorry. I just missed a free piece. Pawn to b5 trapped the bishop. That's embarrassing. That's a free bishop, by the way. I mean, personally, I felt a bit uncomfortable with my king in the center of the board like that, but whoa. I mean, maybe he could have sacrificed his. Ah, he played pawn to f4. What did pawn to f4 even do? Pawn to f5 doesn't even do anything. The pawn is not even able to go to f5. Maybe he wants to play g4 f5, but we don't push pawns on the side that your king is on, Mr. Vishy Butt. Hit him with pawn to b5 now. Trap that bishop. So he's going to sack the bishop and then play knight takes, which forks my queen and my bishop. At that point, we put the queen on b8 because we have to keep the bishop guarded. It also hits the knight. And then once he takes, we play queen takes, and we're ahead by a piece. So pawn to b5 is just a fart, man. So yeah, I was expecting that. Sack the bishop, then he plays knight takes, then we pull the queen back to b8, hit the knight. I'm not expecting him to take because he's down by a piece, or maybe pawn c4 here. But we're definitely going to be chasing this knight out of our half of the board for sure, for sure. Okay, he did take on d6, which makes my life easier because he's trading once he's down in material. It's only 1 point though, but I am ahead by a piece at the end of the day. I want to play rook b8, but it will be leaving a7 unprotected, so maybe I don't want to do that. Rook to d1 puts the rook on the same line as my queen. Knight to d5 I like. Let's just go knight d5, hits the bishop. I'm also trying to trade, and I'm applying some pressure to the pawn on f4. You know, some pressure. All he needs to do is pull his bishop back though. Yeah, bishop all the way back to c1 is fine. This is actually not undeveloping the bishop, guys. Like, if the rook was on a1, it's undeveloping the bishop. But because the rook is on a1, he's just tucking his bishop. Like, hopefully you guys understand what the word tuck means. You know, he's just tuck. I don't know. Hopefully you do. But he pulls the bishop back. I want to go knight c5 because I want to trade. But because I'm a very principled man, I'm going to go rook to c8 because I know that rooks needs files. Pawn to c4. Guys getting very aggressive. But let him come at me. That's fine. My knight is under attack. We're going to move the knight. Where do we put the knight? Not sure. Let's just pull the knight back to f6. Not blundering anything. And pawn to c4 could be a nice move by him. If pawn to e4, he's weakening. If d4, he weakens e4, which means I could just leave my knight on the e4 square forever. And I'm also going to be threatening some fork. So I actually want him to play e4. His knight on b3 is also now unprotected. So rook to b8 is an idea to hit that unprotected knight. Okay, he puts the bishop back to b3. And I want to play rook b8 though. Let's go rook to b8. The drawback of rook to b8 is the fact that my pawn on a7 is left unprotected. You see how I'm able to spot drawbacks of my move? Okay, so he moves the knight out the way. Fine. Knight c5 I like. If knight c5, there's pawn b4. If pawn a4 to prevent b4, there's knight b5. And if pawn a6 to prevent knight b5, there's pawn b4. Whoa, guys, cooking. But I'm going to play a6 to prevent knight b5. I don't care what he does in his half of the board. I just don't want his pieces on my half of the board. Eventually, he did play b4. And as I was saying, my plan was to play e5. If e5, he moves the knight. And then my queen and my rook is on the same line. It's tricky, but we're still going to play e5. Both of my rooks are on open lines, by the way, but how active are they? You know, that's the question. They're both pointing towards pawns that are guarded by pawns. So we could say they're just pointing towards chains. You don't want to have your pieces pointing towards chains. So maybe I need to figure out how to get my rooks a bit more active or just put them on a more open file. So I was thinking about knight takes e5, but oh, there's no bishop f4 though. Because if he moves the bishop, he blunders the knight. Queen takes c5 I like though, because it kind of pins. Okay, what should I play? The guy has a dark squared bishop. I don't want to have all my pieces on dark squares. Queen takes, there's knight f3. All right, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna play knight takes. I'm gonna play knight takes. If I has a dark squared bishop, do not have all your pieces on dark squares if the opponent has a dark squared bishop. The reason why I'm doing it is because I'm a master. Nah, I'm just joking. It's because I'm aware. That's why I'm doing it. There's a lot of stuff that you could there's a lot of principles that you could break in chess if you're just aware, to be honest. Like castle your king as quickly as possible. You don't have to castle your king if you're aware of the fact that your king is not castled. And I'm not saying you should just sit the king in the center being, I'm aware, and then the guy open up the center and checkmate the king. It's just that, okay, I'm aware that he's not able to do it and he's not able to attack my king. Okay, pawn c5 hits the queen. Let's just play queen d5, just moving the queen forward. And I'm also taking my queen off a dark square, so that's good. Still don't I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of scared of the fact that these pawns looks like this, but unless he's able to play a6, b5, I shouldn't be scared. Like I am scared, but I know that I shouldn't be scared. So it's just an emotion thing. I have two pieces on d3. He has two, but if he moves the knight, my queen becomes another piece. So I'm also x-raying d3. And now I want to play rook to e8, rook to d8, and then both of my rooks are gonna be really doing something. Rook to f4, rook to f4. I guess he's just adding some additional defense to the knight. If I takes, I don't have anything. With that being said, let me just activate my rook just a bit more, putting my rook on the same line as the queen, x-raying the bishop. And if he moves his queen to any little weird square, then he's gonna be losing a defender of the d3 pawn. Remember, be aware of the drawback principle. If he puts his queen on f1, the bishop is unprotected, but knight takes d3, rook takes, guards it. Queen takes d3, queen takes, guards it. So maybe I need to play rook to d8. All right, so queen moves to e2, which means he's putting the queen on the same diagonal as my bishop. And I'm gonna, nah, yes, knight to f3 check. If rook takes f3, nah, no, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Now, maybe knight back to c6. I'm just trying to trade some pieces off the board. And the fact that his bishop is unprotected and is on the same line as my rook, or if I could just magically just capture my queen here, that would be a fork. But I don't want to move my queen, so I think it's going to be knight c6. Like, he should not be trading, but my knight attacks his knight and my rook attacks his bishop. So something has to come off the board here, which is what my plan is, to just trade the pieces. So if knight takes, I go queen takes. Knight is still heading towards d5, and his bishop is still unprotected. Okay, so he traded. Let's just take here. Oh, and his time is also running out. He has 1 minute 45. I have 2 minute 57. He's gonna move one of these pieces. Maybe rook f3. Rook f3. There's no bishop h5 due to g4. He decides to move the queen. Now, because I want to trade, I could sack and then play knight here. But let's just play knight here, and that's forking the queen, the rook and the bishop. So he pulls back the bishop. Bishop to g. Bishop to h4. Yes, he's able to play pawn to g4, but the rook is now unprotected, which means in that particular scenario, I just grab the pawn on b4. That's a pawn. But then once he moves the rook, I'm going to have two pieces under attack. So we can't do that. We can't do that. What if bishop h4, pawn g4, knight c3? Yeah, there's... Oh my lord. Queen c3, I take. And if he takes, I takes. Knight c3 hits the rook, and I'm also threatening knight e2, which is a fork. And if he moves the rook, wait, what if he just moves the rook though? No, if he moves the rook, I take this rook. Bishop h4 is just a very strong move. Because okay, pawn g4, now we play knight c3. Very strong move. Knight c3. Hitting the rook. If queen takes knight, I play queen takes rook. And this is unprotected. This is unprotected. So that would be a fork. If he moves this rook, I take this rook. If he moves this rook, oh, what if he puts the rook here though? No, if he puts the rook here, I take. And if he puts the rook here, I fork. Ay, ay, ay. Okay, so he moves the rook to e2. And as we said, we take the free rook on f3. If he takes the knight or the bishop, now I'm able to take this rook with check. Well, this bishop with check, but he blocks with the rook. So instead of doing that, let's just take with the actual rook. Because if he takes the bishop, that's going to lead to a checkmate. which he did. And this is now just checkmate in two moves. We go rook to e1 check. The king has to move to h2, and that's going to be a checkmate. So let's check here. King has to go here, and that's just checkmate. More Scandinavian against 1800 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1800. Let's play some very solid Scandinavian. And what I've been noticing is, for some reason, the games against the higher rated players are not too hard because they are trying to attack more. Like the lower rated players, they're not trying to attack. And because I'm playing solid, I have to like grind out the position. But the higher rated guys is they just want to start attacking me immediately. But we can't blunder with the Scandinavian, you know? So it's very easy for them to blunder. Okay, he's developing. We're developing. We know where the pieces go. Knight f3, bishop f5. No need to explain what's happening. Pawn d4. He decides to play pawn d3. Let's go pawn to e6 here. Maybe we should have played pawn to c6, so that way if the bishop goes here, we immediately go back. But he castles his king, so now we get the chance to play pawn c6. So once the bishop goes to d2, we just go back. We're safe. Pawn to h3 was played, which means knight h4 could be an idea. So let's just play pawn to h6 ourselves. And one thing I've noticed is when they put their pawn on d3 and not d4, knight to d4 becomes an additional move that you want to be aware of. Bishop is on d2, pulls the queen back to c7, regular stuff. We know what's happening, right? No need to explain, right? Good. And we know what the next few moves are, right? Bishop e7 or d6, knight e7 castle, knight b6 to d5, then rook goes to d8, rook goes to c8. Like that's like 15 moves without blundering, and then you're gonna get like such a solid position that is hard to blunder. Like we're chill here. Okay, knight c to e2. Guy definitely wants to play at least bishop f4 to hit my queen, or maybe knight g3 to hit my bishop. But the plan was to play bishop d6. So there's no knight g3 and there's no bishop f4. So why did you play knight to e2, bro? Well, he played a4. A4 is to prevent b5, but I don't even have a plan of playing b5. Let's just play knight d7. And I want you guys to notice how, like in some of the games, I decide to castle early. Some of the games, I just develop then I castle. It actually doesn't really matter because because of how solid the position is. There's no way for him to be like, okay, he's not castling his king. Let's go for the king. You know, it's harder for him to do that. So bishop to c3. And here's the thing. If I castle, it's harder for me to play knight b6 to d5 because if I castle knight b6, he takes double up my pawns. So let's play knight b6 now. Still haven't castled. And one thing I notice is if he takes and then I take, it opens the g file and I could actually attack his king. So now he pulls back his bishop. Now I play knight to d5, hits this bishop. And I guess he's going to pull back the other bishop. He didn't. He decided to give up the bishop for a knight. And I think it's because if I take, he thinks he's able to take, but he's not. Because once I play rook to g8, the rook is on the same line as the queen. So I'm still going to take on d5, hit the bishop. He's just not able to take. And he's 1800, so he's not going to take. And I'm going to be able to. Okay, guys, let's think here. Let's think here. We've been castling kingside the whole time. If the guy pulls his bishop back, what are the chances of pawn to g5 followed by pawn to g4 being a winning plan and just attack his king? Like, what are the chances? With that being said, maybe this is a little idea that we could use. You know, like just keep the king in the center. Like, if you're a low rated player and you don't understand what I'm saying, don't do this. Castle your king quickly. Anyways, for the persons who are understanding, keep the king in the center. You know, give ourselves the decision on, okay, do I want to castle king side? Do I want to castle queen side? And then based on what is happening, then we make the decision to castle. So bishop d2, and by the way, me castling on the queen side, it's also risky because the guy could also start his attack on my king as well. For example, if he plays pawn to c4, he's immediately attacking my knight, you know, but he's weakening his pawn on d3, you know. I'm able to see these things. Remember, if you're a Scandinavian, okay, I forgot the whole point of the video. The whole point of the video is for solid players to just make it hard for them to blunder. If you castle on the queen side, it's not hard for you to blunder. I'm just saying it's not hard for you to blunder anymore. But then he plays pawn to c4. We can't really take because the knight is under attack. So the plan is to play knight b4. Now I have two attackers. He has 0 defenders. And I mean, if the guy decides to give up 2 of his bishops for 2 knights, I'm chill. But remember, as a solid player, feel free to castle your king on the king side, so that way it's hard for you to blunder. If you want to add a little spice to it, then castle on the queen side and attack their king. But that's not the point of this video. I'm just doing this based on this particular position. Okay, then he plays pawn to d4. All right, now it's getting interesting. Now it's getting very interesting. What to do with this knight? There's pawn to c5 here, by the way, but there's knight d3, there's knight c2, there's bishop c2. All of these are moves on his half of the board. If bishop c2, there's queen c1, which is the only move. After queen c1, that's when I could go bishop to d3, because now I pin the knight to the rook. And then if the rook goes to e1, then then knight c2 is going to be a fork. If bishop c2 and the queen goes to e1, then knight d3 traps the queen. If bishop c2, queen c1, bishop d3, bishop takes knight, then I just play bishop takes knight. His knight is still pinned, so I'm fine. So let's go bishop c2. And by the way, like, I haven't even started any attack on his king. So if the game ended and there hasn't been any sort of pawn storm going towards his king, then it means it was really unnecessary for me to castle on the queen side. So just keep that in mind. So queen goes to c1. Idea is to ensure that the queen no longer guards the knight. Then we pull the bishop back to b3, so that we have the tempo. We have the initiative. We're playing moves, so that way he has to react to the moves. Okay, I mean, the guy could just put the queen back on d1 to be nah, because the queen is the only defender of this. It's not a bad move. It's not a bad move. Okay, he's attacking my bishop. My bishop and my knight is under attack. Let's think. His knight is unprotected. I take 3 points. He take 3 points. I mean, worst case scenario, I just move my bishop, he move his rook, I take, and then his king side is weak, so I'm chill. What I'm afraid of is if I take 3 points, he take 3 points, hit the queen. Oh, but then my queen takes, his rook is under attack, and my knight is guarded. So let's just take on e2. And black is actually winning here. So maybe he's like, okay, I'm attacking his knight, I'm attacking his queen, but no, I take on d6. Now I protect my knight. I'm attacking your rook. Funny thing is, if you play rook to e1, I hit you with knight d3. That is called a fork, sir. So he's in trouble. I think he should play bishop takes knight here. Just take the knight, I take the bishop, and then once he moves the rook, I take the knight, which is the only defender of the d4 pawn. He's going to be forced to double up the pawns in front of his king, and then I take this. But my 1800 friend did not see it, so we're just going to fork him. So knight d4 hits the queen. The thing is, I kind of want to take on f3 though, to weaken his king. So let's think. Do we want material or do we want to weaken the king? I'm trying to get both. So knight c3, queen moves. Oh, knight c3, queen move. Don't take the rook. Because if we take the rook, he takes with the knight. So knight c3, queen move, we take the knight. Nah, but then he just takes our knight. What do I want? Material or weakening his king? Take the knight. If I take the knight, he takes my knight. I take his bishop, he takes. And then I'm ahead by a pawn. I have 1 point. And his king is weak. Fork him. Queen moves. Let's just fork him. I mean, at the end of the day, it's material. It's material. We're not gonna lose the game because we decided to get more material. And it's not like I'm being greedy and I'm leaving my king in the center of the board or anything. My position is so solid. He's the one who is in trouble. Okay, queen moves to c3. So my knight is under attack. So if I take his knight, he takes my knight. So let's just take his knight. And okay, he also decides to take with the rook, which means if I take, there's queen takes, but I don't care. Why don't I care? Because I'm ahead in material. And what do we do when we're ahead in material? We trade. So now he needs to play queen takes d4. And as I explained before, knight was the only defender of the pawn. Knight no longer guards the pawn. Take the free pawn. Now we're ahead by 4 points, hitting this bishop, hitting this pawn. Bishop c3 is uncomfortable. I actually don't. This is giving him unnecessary counterplay. Because now queen d5, there's queen f7. So here's what I'm gonna play. I'm gonna play queen d7 to protect f7, give him g7, and if he takes on g7, rook g8 and try to start an attack. But if rook g8, there's bishop to h6. So that was kind of That was kind of uncalled for, to be honest. That was uncalled for. That was not. That was definitely uncalled for. Because I don't. I mean, maybe I have an attack, but it's very slow. You know. Bishop takes rook over. Bishop here, rook g6. Bishop move, rook g1. Okay, there's probably an attack there. And okay, he decided not to take, but the guy's like, yo, the threat is better than the execution. That's what he's saying. Because all of a sudden, my pawn here is under attack. So let's just guard the pawn. How do I even guard this pawn? King to b1 puts my king on a dark square. That could get tricky. He didn't need to do all of this, though. That's the thing. You see what happened when you castle on opposite side? Things like this happen. Okay, pawn to a6. There's probably queen to a7. And then pawn to b6, there's probably pawn to a5. So I think I'm forced to play king to b8. And then now he takes here, hits the rook. Once I move, he checks. Once I move the king, he takes on h6. And instead of being ahead by 4 points, I'm going to be ahead by 2 points. Still winning, but I did not need to do all of that. And I also have 2 minutes on the clock. So I'm not going to have to lock in just to win this game when I could have just been cruising. So he did take the pawn. Let's hit the bishop. Now he just needs to check and take. But once he check, I move to a1, and then once he takes, maybe rook g6. It's not the end of the world. Okay, queen takes is also fine. Queen takes is also fine. Is there any clever way to trade the queens off the board here? For example, the queen is the only defender of the bishop. So if I play queen to d2, no, 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 that doesn't work because the king is on a dark square. But I'm still gonna do it though. Still gonna do it. Because now he's able to check, and then once I move the king, he moves his queen. No, but I'm also attacking the rook. I think he has to trade. Because even if he gets to check and I move, my queen hits the rook. And then once he takes, my rook is on his second rank. But then he has this very annoying pass pawn that will cause some problems. So, and I have a minute 40 on the clock. So I'm going to start speeding up now. Whoa, rook to e3 was not bad at all. Rook to e3 just prevents everything that I just said. Didn't trade queen, didn't move the bishop. All right, let's say we check him here. King moves here. Swing this here. Threaten the mate. I'm not comfortable with my king on a dark square, to be honest. Let's play king to a8 first, because I'm not comfortable with my king on a dark square. Okay, queen to a7. I'm not afraid of queen to a7. I just need to play fast. I just need to play fast, to be honest. Um, okay, let's check the king. Maybe grab the pawn. Yeah, rook to a3 is something that it could give him an idea to attack, but so I'm not too afraid of it. There's queen to f4, and he blundered. That's an unprotected bishop. King is exposed. Hit him with queen to f4, and that's called a fork. So now he has to move his king, by the way. If he plays pawn to g3, we take on f2. Oh, this is mate. Nah, it's not mate. There's actually rook to g3. If rook to g3, what if I trade rooks first? Like rook to g3, take the rook. Yeah, let's just take on f. No, that would have been a blunder. What am I doing? We have to trade the rooks first. So we trade the rooks first. And then once he trade, we take on f6. And this is winning. But I only have 30 seconds on the clock. So I would try to flag if I was white. So the queen goes back. Let's just play a6, just to ensure that if something happens and I have 5 seconds on the clock and I'm pre-moving, they don't lose the game. So pawn b3, let's play queen e5, put the queen on the same line as the king. Rook to g8 could be an idea. Say h4, let's go rook g8. Now we're threatening his pawn on g3. He guards the pawn. Let's play queen f5. This is me trying to trade queens. He's obviously not going to trade, but then I'm going to start rolling the pawn. Let's just start rolling the pawn up the board. Pass pawns must be pushed. Okay, let's play queen g3. That's 2 attackers on his g pawn. And then I'm going to play f5. Okay, if he moves the king, I take. If he moves the queen, okay, he moves the king, which means this is just one defender. So it's over. Once I take on g3, if he trades queen, it becomes easier for me. If he doesn't trade queens, I'm able to take on h4. So for example, queen to e2, we take on h4 with check. And then the king has to move. Now I'm able to play rook to h8, threatening mate on h1. So yeah, this could be leading to a mate. So he moves the king. Oh, it's not mate. It's not mate. Okay, let's give a check and play rook h4. It's not. What? How do I have 3 seconds on the clock? Scandinavian against 1900 players. That was one move away from mate though. Stick around. Opponent is now 1900. Let's play some more solid Scandinavian. Like endgame skills has to be on par, but hopefully you guys are learning your endgames. Pawn d4 is good. Let's just play knight c3 here. Well, knight f6. And then after he plays knight to f3, I'm going to play bishop to f5. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm actually just waiting on him to play knight c3. If he doesn't play knight c3 and play something like pawn to f4, then I'm just going to pull the queen back to d8 and then continue with the setup. So that's what he's doing. Okay, pawn c4 was played. Let's just pull the queen back to d8. Let's just pull the queen all the way back to d8, and then we're going to be going with our setup. This is like a different one. Bishop to g5. Okay, let's play pawn e6. And because the bishop is on g5, we're going to be playing bishop e7, castling the king, and we're still going to be going with the setup. Okay, Burr is moving the same piece more than once in the opening stage of the game. Hmm. There's actually a funny little idea, very funny. Like if I take his knight, he takes with the rook, then I check. Does it work? If I take and he takes with the queen, then I take on d4. If I take the knight, he takes with the rook, I check. There's no knight that is able to block. That was the whole point of the move. And then if he decides that he's going to block with the bishop, the queen no longer guards d4, so I take on d4. And yes, my bishop is left hanging, but if he takes my bishop, I take his knight. At that point, however, if he decides to pull his knight back, I take his bishop, and if he sack his knight, I first take the bishop. This is why my Nigerian friend, you should not be moving the same pieces more than once in the opening stage of the game. Okay, so he took with the rook. The whole point was to play bishop to b4. And, we're a bit off script. There's no c6, knight d7, knight b6, knight d5. There's no queen on c7. But he did it, not us. He was the one who thinks he could be fancy, not playing knight c3 to gain the tempo on the queen, playing pawn c4, thinking, oh, he's tricking me. But then he got tricked. Now, he doesn't necessarily have to lose a pawn here. Like, he could play king e2, and then I'm just going to castle, but then his king is going to be very uncomfortable. He's probably going to play king e2, but I don't think he's going to play king e2 against me. That's risky. Now, one move I actually didn't see was if he blocks with the bishop and I take the pawn and then he plays queen a5 check, I block with the knight. Because at that point, if he takes with the knight, that's mate. And if he takes my bishop, I take the knight with check. Yes, that's what we're doing. Oh, my Nigerian friend. Okay, let's get the king out the center. My Nigerian friend. Look on that king. Okay, now he's gonna get a tempo on my bishop, which I'm gonna pull back. And maybe now we're going to follow the same. Nah, we're not going to be following the same idea. Our king is out the center. His king is in the center. The plan is to open the center. And let's just say we don't checkmate his king, because it's not every time someone's king is not able to get castled, all of a sudden you're going for someone's king. It's like, okay, he's going to be having issues developing his pieces. Like, because now the bishop is not able to go here. So he has to play g3, bishop g2. He also has to find g3, bishop g2. And I'm about to start my attack right now. Okay, pawn f3 is not bad. He's trying to hide his king on f2, which is not bad. That's not bad at all. I'm thinking of c5, but I don't want to trade queens. I'm thinking of knight c6 takes. I mean, neutralizes knight, but it gives me double pawns. So let's just play h6 first, just to get the bishop out of our half of the board. Let's just do that first. So get the bishop out of our half of the board. And I want to play knight d7, but then after knight takes, queen takes, he takes on f6, and then it gets weird. But I'm not scared of my king being a bit exposed, because his king is really exposed. But I don't want to, let's not create any unnecessary risk. Let's pull the bishop back to e7, so that way once we play knight d7, if he takes, we take back and we don't get any double pawns. Now there is king to f2, but if king f2, due to the unprotected bishop, there is some little knight g4, knight e4 check. And then once he takes, we take the bishop with check. It doesn't really give us much, but it gives us the bishop. So pawn to g4 is actually a very nice move. It's a very nice move, especially since he's the one with the weak king. He's kind of complicating the game, which is the correct thing to do. Because I play h6, it gives him a hook to play g5. But let's just play. Is it knight c6 here, or is it knight d? Let's just go knight d7. Pawn g5 is definitely something. Pawn g5, grab the knight, he grabs my knight. Pawn g5 takes, bishop takes, and then there's a foul on my king side. So my Nigerian friend is not playing too badly, but he pulls the bishop back to g3. Now I want to just open as much lines as I possibly can. So let's play pawn c5 because I know he wants to play h4 g5, especially since his king looks like that. Like he's going for blood. And now he plays d5, but I kind of want this to happen though. Because look at this. I'm not even going to think about it. I'm just going to take it. Because once I take, the E file is now open. So let's just take. Okay, am I missing anything? Nah, let's just take. Once he takes, I'm going to play rook to E8, put my rook on the same line as his king. So we're just chilling at this point. I mean, he's going to play king to F2 for sure. But it gives us a little tempo. Okay, he took. Let's just stick to the script. Rook to E8. Rook is on the same line as the king. King to F2 will happen. And then after king F2, I'm thinking about C4, but I don't want to be too ambitious with C4. The idea is to open this diagonal so that way we could start checking his king. But the king can always run to G2. So even though his king is kind of weak, I don't think the plan is to checkmate his king. I think the plan is just to said, hey, I have more active pieces than you. Let's keep putting the pieces on active scores and then just let him solve the development issue that he has on his own. For example, king f2, what's wrong with knight b6? Knight b6 is it's a nice move. That's one, two, three attackers, and he only has one defender. Looks like it's winning a pawn to me. Okay, so he did play king to f2, and as we stated, we're going to play knight b6. All of a sudden, the weak king is now not the only issue. He has an overexerted pawn. Okay, if he push, I take. I think that's just a pawn. We're about to win a pawn, which is nice, by the way. Well, there's actually bishop c4, but then I'm gonna take, and then once the knight takes, I still have two pieces attacking his pawn. So we are going to be winning a pawn. Okay, I didn't see that move. That's a nice move, bro. That's a nice move. I didn't see that move. I think we're still winning the pawn, but bishop to b5 is just nice. Like he's attacking my rook. I don't want to block with anything. I have to put my rook back on f8. Again, I am going to win the pawn, but that's just a nice move. The good thing is his bishop is a bit compromised on b5. So I should be able to play moves like a6 and just chase away his bishop. So still winning the pawn, but I'm going to have to waste more moves putting my rook on the open file. Okay, so rook moves to e1. How do we take our pawn here? Because it's ours. Let's just take with the f knight. Uh-huh. Eventually, pawn a6 will come, and our rook is going to be able to get this back. And because we're ahead by a pawn, moves like bishop f6 or bishop h4, I'm thinking of because we're trying to trade the pieces off the board. There's also bishop to g5 that I'm thinking of as well. Queen to e2, okay. Putting a lot of pieces on the same line as my bishop. He's also trying to play rook to d1. There are two pieces on my half of the board. So let's start with a6, following the principle of neutralization, chasing pieces away from my half of the board. Pawn to f6 will not work because it has a drawback. Bishop back to d3. And, okay, thinking of knight b4, but won't play that. Think I need to play bishop to d6 because I'm assuming the rook is going to be going to d1. And then I'm going to be playing queen c7. There's also bishop to h4, rook d1 takes, pawn takes, and then I go here. Let's go with bishop h4. Since it guarantees the trade, this is me forcing a trade. He's gonna play rook d1 for sure. Rook d1, there's knight f4, which does absolutely nothing, but it's just a possibility. Queen to I didn't see that move. Doesn't work though. There's knight f6 hits the queen. If knight f6, bishop takes, I take with check. If knight f6, queen here, maybe I check here first. Who knows? Pawn f5 does not work. So let's just play knight f6 hits the queen. Its offense is the best defense at its finest. That was his idea. He threatened the mate and attacked my unprotected pawn. That was his idea. Okay, we're no longer ahead by a pawn. Let's take here. Oh, he has a minute on the clock. How am I not seeing that this guy has a minute on the clock? And I have 4 minutes on the clock. That's why he's playing so well. He's using up his time. I'm not gonna lie. This guy had the worst opening. His king is on g3. But where's my advantage? You know where my advantage is? Right here. He has 1 minute on the clock. That's where my advantage is. Rook a8, give him the pawn, hit him with queen c7, pin the knight, pawn f4 though. Maybe I should play knight d5. Nah, what to do? Queen d6, rook d1, knight d5, bishop e4. Oh, okay. Let's go queen d6. Queen d6 comes with some ideas of because I pinned the knight. So rook d1 I was expecting. Now we go knight d5. This is very risky, by the way, because I'm putting my knight in danger. But because his knight is pinned, I'm actively threatening to PP on the PP. So he has to be careful. Plus, I have a little in between move because his queen is also, yeah, that's something. Bishop seems to be hanging, but it's not. What if I go here, hit the queen? If I hit the queen, he sacked the rook. Ouch. Then I take the rook. He plays queen takes. He's also threatening to takes, rook takes. With the queen, sack the rook, takes, maybe rook takes. What's this? Rook to d8, maybe? Let's go rook to d8. Yeah, let's just add some more defenders. The guy's applying a lot of pressure to my pinned knight, but he has no time on the clock. What can I say? And his knight is also pinned. Okay, pawn to f4 is a very good move. Guy's still playing well. Now, if I takes, oh, haha, we got him. But it's the time pressure. It's the time pressure. You played very well, my Nigerian friend. But once I take this bishop, if you take back, my knight and my queen now target f4. So once your king move, we grab the knight, we win the game. Let's take on c4. And the good thing is, I also have two pieces guarding my knight. So this is winning. He took with the knight, check. King has to move, grab the knight, we win the game. King moved out the way. Look at this. Yes, that's a knight, but we take on g4 first. That's called an in-between move or a zugzwang. He moves the king. Now we take the knight. We're ahead by 5 points. He has no time on the clock. With that being said, more Scandinavian against 2000 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 2000. Let's play some more solid Scandinavian. We're going to be finishing off this with a bang. So they take, let's play queen takes d5 and knight c3, we play queen a5. Like, let's not lose, let's not use too much time. We don't want what happened in that 1800 game to happen to us in this 2000. You see how fast this guy's playing? He's also trying to flag me. So let's take on d3. And what I did in the 1100 game was I played e6 before c6. If you don't want to trade the queens, play c6 before e6. So that way there's no queen to b5. So he quickly castled this king. Let's now play e6, knight e7, bishop e6, castle, regular stuff. Rook to e1. Do I play bishop d6 first or knight d7? I really don't think it matters, to be honest. And I'm just going to go with the little idea that I heard someone says, always develop the knights before the bishop. So let's play knight d7 first. But once you know the setup, it actually really doesn't matter. It's one of those potato patata type of scenarios. But this move bishop to f4. So maybe if I wanted to prevent his bishop from going to the f4 square, I should have actually started with bishop to d6. But I'm doing fine. Like the bishop goes to either e7 or d6 anyways. So now I'm just going to castle and then continue to play some chess from here. So one thing about this is he did not put his bishop on d2, which means there's no queen c7. He immediately put his bishop on f4, which means there's no queen c7. And now he decides to play knight to e4. And he's also trying to play knight d6 check, which would either take my bishop or prevent me from castling. So we're definitely going to be taking on e4. And then once he plays queen e4, there is knight f6, which hits the queen. But no need to rush all of that. to be honest. So let's just get the king out the center of the board. This is probably going to be one of those Magnus endgame grind because, let's see, the guy's 2000. He's playing fine. Position is equal. He has no weakness. I have no weakness. So let's see what happens here. Okay, pawn to h4. I don't know why someone would play pawn to h4. Like, that's gonna haunt him in the end game. I don't. What did that even do? Maybe he wants to put something on g5. I don't know. To be honest, I can't explain why he made that move. But I mean, I'm actually thinking of playing queen d5. Get the queens off the board and hit him with the Magnus endgame grind. But that's like a last resort type of thing. So rook to d8 is what I'm thinking of here. If knight g5, there's always knight f6 hits the queen. Uh, Yeah, let's just play rook to d8. Eventually, I'm going to play knight f6 hits the queen. I may also play h6 just to prevent the knight from going to g5. I don't think I need to prevent the knight from going to g5, by the way, which he did it anyways. So one thing I'm noticing here is I need to be very careful. First of all, he's threatening this checkmate, so we have to prevent it. But there's actually something else that is happening. I think he's threatening to play knight takes f7 followed by queen takes c6, which is an idea that you guys need to keep in mind. So let's just start with knight f6 hits the queen, prevent the mate. But I don't think just an immediate like automatic h6 to attack his knight is going to work, because once he takes and then I takes and then he plays queen takes, I lose 2 pawns because I'm going to also lose this bishop. So the move that he needs to play here is queen to e2, which is a very simple move to find. After queen e2, I'm more than likely going to play queen to f5 just to protect e6, and then I'm going to be chasing away the knight. Plus, queen to f5 also attacks the unprotected bishop on f4. So that's also a very nice idea. Oh, well, if queen to e2, eventually his pawn on d4 is also going to be hanging. And then if he puts the queen on e3, I think I could go with knight d5, hit the queen. Queen move, we take. And then I have the bishop, he has the knight. Not the biggest advantage in the world, but that's how you win at this level. Smallest advantage you get, you take it. So he puts the queen on d3, which means there's no knight takes f7 happening anytime soon. I mean, maybe he could play knight takes e6, but I'm kind of afraid of knight takes e6 because he gets 2 pawns for the piece. But I kind of want him to do it because it's a piece at the end of the day. So he's also putting his queen on the same line as my rook, which means the d4 pawn is pinned. So pawn to c5, pp on the pp makes some sense. But let's start by just following the simple principle of neutralization, which states do not allow pieces on your half of the board. So now that he pulls the knight back, who we go pawn to c5? Definitely. Let's go pawn to c5. And being a Scandinavian player, your breaks are going to be e5 and c5. But I want you to kind of prioritize c5 over e5, to be honest, because c5 is attacking a pawn that is in the center by using a pawn that is not in the center. And when you play e5, you leave your f5 square weak. So I'm not saying you should never play e5, but yeah, check to see if c5 works first before you check to see if e5 works. Okay, queen to b3. Didn't see that move. Very strong move, by the way. So he basically got his queen off the same line as my king, and he's attacking my unprotected pawn. Very nice move. I mean, taking on d4, and then he takes on b7, which hits my unprotected bishop. It's not a bad move at all, sir. All right, let's play knight d5 first. Let's centralize the knight, hit the bishop, force the bishop to move. I guess he's going to play bishop g3 or bishop h3. And probably I'm going to play queen b6, probably. I mean, but then if I play pawn b6, my queen is looking weird. Oh, there's also queen to b4. I kind of like queen b4. Yeah, I think I prefer queen to b4. They both do the same thing. But if queen to b4 and he decides to take the queen, I could actually take with a pawn, not the knight. Intentionally give myself double pawns because it's going to be so hard for him to play c3. And then I'm going to be able to play rook to c8 and then attack his pawns. But if he knows how to play chess, he knows that to take is a mistake. So he just needs to keep the tension there. Especially since his rating is 2000, he's not going to take. Okay, he took on c5 first, which makes a whole lot of sense. I don't want to take his queen because he takes with the a pawn, his rook gets a file. If I take with the queen here, he takes on b7, which means maybe I need to take with the bishop. Yeah, let's take with the bishop. And then if he trades queen, I take with the knight, hit c2. There's queen to g4, which threatens to just grab his unprotected bishop, and then play something like bishop to b6 to guard my pawn. And then, it keeps pieces on the board, so it gives me more chances to win. So rook to d1, he's getting his rook in the game. The guy's playing very strong, by the way. So let's start with queen to... Nah, queen to g4 doesn't make any sense, because then he plays knight e5 and the queen guards the bishop. Don't be playing hope chess, guys. Okay, grab the queen. He takes knight b4. Oh, am I gonna win this game? All right, let's take the queen. And then once he takes, we play knight b4, threaten the pawn. We're now in the end game, by the way. So it's a different plan. So every move that I make should answer one of the following questions. Am I attacking a weak pawn? Am I pushing a passed pawn? Am I activating my king? The guy's also managing the time perfectly. So there's no type of flagging business happening. It's just an equal endgame. But you guys have been watching this video and you guys have been seeing what has been happening in these endgames. So, there's no difference, bro. You're going to be getting Magnust. That's what it's called. It's called Magnust with a ED. Okay, pawn to c3. Hit him with knight d3. Hit the rook, hit the pawn. No. Knight d3, there's rook e2. My knight is almost trapped. That's a problem. There's no knight c1, obviously. There's no knight f4. I don't want to trade first. Okay, knight d3, there's rook e2. And then rook to d2 is coming next. So I need to be very concrete here. Knight d2, rook e2, rook d7, followed by rook d8. At that point, if he plays rook to... Maybe I could take... Or here, maybe take here. Oh, that's the issue. Now I'm going to have to risk losing just to try to win this game. Knight d3, rook e2, rook d7. Knight e5 I take. So knight d2, rook e2, pawn b4. There's bishop b6. Um, Knight d2, rook e2, rook d7. All right, guys, we're going for it. My time is also running out. The guy has more time on the clock than me. It's not a good sign at all. It's not a good sign. So he's going to play rook e2 for sure. Because, okay, now let's quickly play rook d7. My knight is also unprotected. No, my knight is not unprotected. My rook is unprotected and my knight is pinned. So if he has any chance of doing a tactic, did I just blunder? Knight e1, rook d7, rook e2, knight e5. Holy shoes. God damn, I just blundered. Wait. If I go rook d1 and he plays rook d2, guys, 3 attackers, I have 2 defenders. If I take here, I lose. If I go here, I lose. No. Wait. Boom, boom. If he takes my rook, I take. If he takes... Oh, okay, it's fine. I'm just overreacting. It's fine. Yeah, but it's gonna be one of those drawn end games, man. I'm gonna have to swindle him. So rook to d2 next. I thought there was some little tactical stuff. For example, rook to d2, knight takes f2, rook takes d7, rook takes d7. Maybe nah, that's not gonna work. All right, we'll have to just pull the knight back to e5. It's an unprotected knight, but if he takes my knight, I take his rook. If he takes, I take, and it's the same thing. If he takes my knight, I take his rook. So he has to take, and then we're gonna take, and it's just drawn. Okay, where do I put this bishop? Let's just pull the bishop back. Okay, I'm almost done by an entire minute, so I have to speed up a bit here. Bishop to d6 is good. He's trying to prevent my king from coming in the game, but I'm going to play pawn to f6 followed by king f7. Get my king in the game. He's also getting his king in the game. Pawn to e5 is coming next. And then I'm going to play king to e6. Pawn b4. Let's play pawn e5. And I guess he wants to... I mean, if he plays knight c5, I'm happy to trade. Like, okay, pawn c4 though. Not happy about that because he wants to play c5. Let's play bishop to d4 first. And just so that way I have a decent looking bishop. And then he plays b3. Now I play king e6 to attack his bishop. Now, if he plays pawn c5, there should be a point where I'm able to play... Okay, he moves the bishop. If I hit the knight, he checks. So let's go here. Let's target the weak pawns. I have to play fast though, because he's playing very fast. Pawn b4. God, what's this? Now let's play g5. I want to play e5. So he moves the king. Now we hit the knight. He's playing so fast though. The knight has to go back. He doesn't have any forward squares for the knight. I mean, I'm not gonna lie though. Taking on h4 is actually a pawn. Don't be greedy, guys, but come on. That's a pawn. It's hard. I have the ugliest double pawns, but it's a pawn, bro. All right, so king up, we play f5 to guard the pawn. I'm ahead by a pawn. Knight e2. Okay, let's pull the bishop back. Now I'm trying to trade. If he takes, I play king takes. So he didn't. Let's play knight f6 to g4. Ay, 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 what is this? I have no time. Knight d4, check. I'm just going to take it because I have no time, to be honest. Okay, push. What is this? Check, sir. Hit the king, hit the pawn. That's a fork. Once the king move, grab the pawn. Good, 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 good. If he push, I take stakes. That pass pawn is not going anywhere. Yeah, yeah, you're trying to flag me. King to d6, hit the pawn. If he pushes the pawn, king to d7 wins the pawn. You're trying to flag me. Oh, okay, king up. King up, let's check the king again. Then we grab a third pawn because you're trying to flag me, Mr. Penguin Piano. Now we're just ahead by 3 pawns, by the way. Like, and he resigns.